On the day of Gu Yanchen's 80th birthday, his wife Su Mingyue found a box of letters under the bed. Each letter was addressed to my dear wife Nuanyuan. She opened the letters and found they were filled with intimate conversations between Gu Yanchen and his student Qin Nuanyuan. Su Mingyue had always believed that Gu Yanchen's feelings for Qin Nuanyuan were merely those of a teacher toward a student. The letters were brimming with an almost tangible, overwhelming love. Only then did she realize that Gu Yanchen's feelings ran far deeper than that. The date on the final letter was from before Su Mingyue and Gu Yanchen's wedding. The handwriting in that letter was frantic. The final line scrawled and slanted, Nuanyuan, in this life, I cannot defy the world's judgment to marry you. I can only settle for Su Mingyue as my wife. In our next life, I will be with you, no matter the cost. Even if it means defying all human morality. Su Mingyue's hand trembled violently. The children also drew near and witnessed the scene. Mom, that was so many years ago. Why are you looking at this now? Today the inheritance distribution will be announced. You've been with Dad all these years, so he will definitely give you all the money. Getting the money is the most important thing. Su Mingyue was pushed to Gu Yanchen's bedside by the children. He was on his last breath, yet still exuded that coldness. Tilting his head to announce the distribution of assets, I, Gu Yanchen, hereby bequeath all my property, including real estate, to Miss Qin Nuanyuan. The room erupted in an uproar. I object. Su Mingyue's fingers clenched, a trace of sorrow finally surfacing in her eyes. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, Qin Nuanyuan knelt directly beside Gu Yanchen's bed. Su Mingyue tried to intervene, but the people Qin Nuanyuan had brought shoved her back, forcing her step by step toward the windowsill. The next instant, her body went weightless. In the final moment of her fall, what she saw was Gu Yanchen's eyes, cold to the extreme. In the instant before Su Mingyue closed her eyes, she was still thinking, if I could do it all over again. Gu Yanchen, in this life, I will never marry you. When I opened my eyes again, Gu Yanchen stood by the bedside, looking down as he adjusted his sleeves. Su Mingyue, you schemed your way into my bed to force me to marry you. Well, you got your wish. I've already called my parents. They'll bring the betrothal gifts in 4 days. Are you happy now? Su Mingyue stared at the speaker's face, which looked 40 years younger. In an instant, she realized she had been reborn. She had returned to the days just before the Gu family came to propose marriage in her previous life. Su Mingyue was so overjoyed upon hearing the proposal that she couldn't sleep for nights. Hearing it again now, she felt nothing but profound sorrow as she gazed at Gu Yanchen's cold, indifferent eyes. The events of this very day from her past life instantly flashed through her mind. She had loved Gu Yanchen since childhood. Their families had arranged their marriage, but Gu Yanchen had always been unwilling to consent to it when they reached marriageable age, and with Gu's mother growing anxious about her son's situation, she drugged Gu Yanchen and personally delivered him to her own bed. This forced Gu Yanchen to fulfill the marriage agreement. Gu Yanchen always believed that this marriage was a scheme by Su Mingyue, and after getting married, he became even colder towards her. To win his favor, Su Mingyue did everything she could to make him happy. When Gu Yanchen wanted a promotion, she carried gifts and begged from one place to another on her knees. Gu Yanchen didn't like taking care of children, so from birth to adulthood, he never spent a single minute looking after the child. Gu Yanchen found her an embarrassment, so she became the default shadow, confined to the house, forever hidden from the light. Even when Gu Yanchen took Qin Nuanyuan to events, she could only wait at home, rewarded with nothing but his perfunctory goodnight. Decades passed. She had always believed this was simply Gu Yanchen's true nature. Only after reading the letter did she realize that the cold and ruthless man had once been gentle, but that gentleness had never belonged to her. Su Mingyue sighed, and the lingering obsession in her eyes was completely extinguished. You don't need to take responsibility for me, and besides, I haven't lost anything. The proposal in 4 days is no longer necessary. Gu Yanchen sneered upon hearing this. Su Mingyue, you orchestrated all of this, and now you're saying such things. Are you playing hard to get? Su Mingyue was stunned for a moment, then remembered that she used to enjoy saying the opposite of what she meant when she was younger. There were even a few times when she caused a scene at Gu's mother's place, making Gu Yanchen coax her, but this time, she truly didn't want to. Gu Yanchen, before she could finish, Gu Yanchen turned and left, not even sparing her a glance. As expected, he never let her finish her sentence. Su Mingyue looked away. It didn't matter if Gu Yanhing disagreed, as long as she refused the engagement before the Gu family came to propose, it would be fine. But now, she had more important things to do. Su Mingyue picked up her phone and dialed her mentor's number. Professor, are there still any openings for the human experimentation project in Antarctica? The advisor on the other end of the line was taken aback for a moment, then beamed with delight. Absolutely, the Antarctic team specifically requested you. I'm overjoyed that you're willing to go. However, This assignment could last for decades, and you may even lose all contact with your family. Are you sure about this? Su Mingyue nodded solemnly. I've made up my mind. Then pack up, say your goodbyes to your family, and leave in 4 days. Hearing this, Su Mingyue felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had originally studied this field, but because Gu Yanchen didn't like her being in the public eye, she gave up her dream and now she could finally live for herself. After the initial joy, Su Mingyue remembered her mentor's words, say goodbye to her family. A wave of sadness washed over her, for she had long been without family. Her loved ones had passed away when she was just 10 years old. Precisely for this reason, Mr. and Mrs. Gu took extra special care of her. Gu Yanchen, like an older brother, stood by her side during her darkest hours. That is why she had willingly stayed by his side all these years, but now, she didn't want to go on. Su Mingyue called Gu Yanchen's parents to say there was no need for them to come and formally propose. Mr. and Mrs. Gu merely offered a few words of comfort and did not agree. Not wanting to waste any more time on the matter, Su Mingyue had no choice but to end the call, planning to meet with them in the coming days to discuss it in detail. As soon as she hung up the phone, she remembered her mentor's advice. In a hurry, she left the house to buy some items for her trip to Antarctica, but to her surprise, as soon as she arrived, she heard Gu Yanchen's displeased voice. Su Mingyue, are you done causing trouble? Did you really follow me here? Su Mingyue frowned slightly, still trying to process what was happening. Gu Yanchen stared at her with palpable irritation, his tone icy and laced with anger. I've already agreed to marry you, and I've agreed to have my parents formally propose on my behalf. What more do you want? What was the meaning of calling my parents today to cancel the proposal? Only then did Su Mingyue suddenly understand. Gu's parents must have thought it was Yanchen who angered them, which is why they called to cancel the betrothal. So after hanging up the phone, they called again to scold Yanchen. She spoke, her voice calm. There's no need for anything, because I'm serious. Before she could finish, Yanchen impatiently interrupted. Su Mingyue, why are you so good at acting? Hearing this, Su Mingyue suddenly felt it didn't matter anymore. Never mind. In 4 days, when the Gu family came to propose marriage and couldn't find her, they would naturally realize her words weren't empty and she would never look back. Just as she was about to leave, a familiar voice called out from behind her. Hello, Mrs. Li. Su Mingyue paused for a moment, slightly taken aback. Turning around, she saw Qin Wanwan standing there with a gentle smile. Gu Yanchen watched Qin Wanwan approach, and his previously impatient expression softened. Nuanyuan, today is your graduation day. Pick out anything you like. My treat. Qin Nuanyuan stood somewhat awkwardly behind Gu Yanchen. Professor, these things are all far too expensive. Gu Yanchen frowned slightly. You're my most accomplished student. How could buying you a few things ever be considered too expensive? Hearing this, Su Mingyue couldn't tell if the feeling in her heart was scorn or self-mockery. She frowned in irritation. In her past life, Gu Yanchen had never been willing to buy anything expensive for her, even picking out the cheapest clothes for their child. Yet now, he was willing to spend a fortune for Qin Wanwan. She finally realized how foolish she had been in her previous life. Su Mingyue sighed, unwilling to engage in their interactions any further. She walked straight into the store, planning to buy a suitable for the Antarctic environment. However, as soon as she reached for the jacket, a voice came from behind. Teacher Gu, I've graduated and want to go skiing. This jacket seems perfect for me. Su Mingyue's hand paused for a moment. Turning around, it was indeed Qin Wanwan again. The shop assistant said apologetically, I'm sorry, but this style is the last one in stock. The next shipment won't arrive until next week at the earliest. But this was just a small county town, where clothing suitable for polar regions was extremely scarce, and garments of this material were even rarer. If they don't have it here, you probably won't find it anywhere else. Su Mingyue tightened her grip on the dress, but just as she was about to say she'd pay for it, Gu Yanchen took it from her. Mingyue, Nuan really likes this dress. Let her have it first. I'll buy you one when the new stock arrives next week. After speaking, Gu Yanchen ignored Su Mingyue's objections and paid directly. Su Mingyue felt a bit annoyed. However, she didn't want to argue with Qin Wanwan over a piece of clothing in public, so she turned and left the store. Oh well, I'll just ask my mentor to prepare another one before I leave. Qin Nuanyuan got the clothes but felt no joy at all, since she didn't see the necessary urgency on Su Mingyue's face. So even though Gu Yan helped her take something from Su Mingyue, she didn't feel much sense of accomplishment. Gu Yan saw Su Mingyue's cold expression and called out her name from behind. However, Su Mingyue ignored him and picked up her pace instead. There was one more thing she needed to do while she was out. She had to go to the pawnshop to redeem the watch her mother had pawned before she passed away. But as soon as she stepped inside, she heard Qin Nuanyuan's voice again. Mr. Gu, I really like this watch. Su Mingyue's footsteps halted, and she slowly raised her eyes. Just listen as Qin Nuanyuan continued, her voice tinged with a hint of coquettishness. My father has been searching online for this watch. Today I saw it and thought of giving it to him. He would definitely love it. Su Mingyue gave Qin Nuanyuan a deep look, her cold gaze turning toward Gu Yanchen. Wouldn't he really even take this watch away? Gu Yanchen fell silent for a moment, then spoke calmly, since Nuanyuan likes it, I will definitely get this watch for you. Upon hearing this, Su Mingyue's face turned pale instantly. She fixed her gaze on the man, Gu Yanchen. You know how important this watch is to me. Her voice trembled slightly, and even the pawnshop owner couldn't help but interject. Yes, Miss Su has come to us many times, always asking me to keep this watch for her. Mr. Gu, I'm afraid we can't sell it to you this time. Gu Yanchen just stared coldly at the shop owner. If you don't sell me this watch, he said, I'm afraid your shop won't be staying in business for much longer. In the end, the watch ended up in Qin Nuanyuan's hands, but the moment she took it, her hand slipped, the watch fell heavily to the floor and shattered. Tiny components scattered everywhere, the hands bent out of shape. Su Mingyue suddenly knelt down, trembling hands slowly picking up the shattered pieces. This was the only thing her mother had left her. Her eyes were bloodshot, on the verge of tears. Gu Yanchen felt a pang of guilt and wanted to say something, but hesitated and remained silent. Su Mingyue returned home in a daze, asking around if any renowned watchmaker could repair the timepiece. Most people, however, simply shook their heads. Su Mingyue sat on the bed, clutching the shattered watch, her heart utterly desolate. Just as she wished to be alone with her thoughts, Qin Nuanyuan knocked on the Su family's door. Su Mingyue was extremely irritated and ordered her servants not to open the door. Qin Nuanyuan didn't make a fuss, standing outside the door all night, claiming she wanted to apologize. When Gu Yanchen learned of this, he stormed over, and as soon as he entered, he slapped Su Mingyue hard. Su Mingyue, how could you be so vicious? Didn't you know Nuanyuan is on her period today? She's always in agony with the cramps, and you made her stand all night. Is it really so hard for you to just say you forgive her? Su Mingyue covered her face and finally couldn't hold back a cold, bitter laugh. What does that have to do with me? She knew full well how much I loved that watch, but she snatched it away anyway and ended up breaking it. Now you want me to comfort her? Gu Yanchen, do you even have a heart? The two of them remained at a stalemate. The servant rushed in, panic-stricken. Oh no, Miss Su, the young lady at the door is covered in blood. Gu Yanchen's face changed instantly, and without hesitation, he rushed out. Su Mingyue coldly watched Gu Yanchen's retreating figure, tears falling drop by drop onto the ground. Gu Yanchen had never felt such heartache for her before. Never. In this moment, she finally realized how ridiculous her past self had been. Gu Yanchen, in this lifetime, I will never love you again. She took a deep breath, slowly stood up, and began to gather every memory of Gu Yanchen in the room. Su Mingyue tore up every single photo of them together. From childhood to adulthood, all the diaries she had written for him were thrown into the brazier and burned to ashes. The flames consumed everything, along with all her youthful obsessions. All these years, it had been her unrequited love. Gu Yanchen never treated her kindly, not even a hint of affection. How could she have persisted for so long? She didn't even know herself. After burning those things, Su Mingyue felt unwell and went to the hospital alone. But just as she was registering, she inadvertently heard Gu Yanchen and Qin Nuanyuan's voices. Teacher, you're so good to me. I know I'll have a hard time adjusting when you get married someday. Su Mingyue's footsteps faltered slightly. Nuan, even if I get married someday, I'll always think of you as my best student. I'll always look out for you. Qin Nuanyuan's voice held a trace of melancholy as she asked quietly, just a student, but you'll have your own children someday. The air fell silent for a moment. Then, Gu Yanchen's voice came, cold and resolute. Children, I will never let them occupy my heart, nor will I care for them as I did for you. I will also never allow them to bear my surname. I will never acknowledge them. He paused, his tone firm. In the future, all my inheritance will be yours. Upon hearing this, Su Mingyue felt a chill run through her entire body. She didn't look at Qin Nuanyuan, who was leaning in Gu Yanchen's arms, her eyes red with emotion. Instead, she slowly closed her eyes, memories of her previous life flashing through her mind. Su Mingyue still remembered the day their child was born, when Gu Yanchen was unusually gentle with her. Back then, Gu Yanchen said the child should take her surname, Su, because she was the one who had endured the hardship of bringing the child into the world. She had mistaken this for Gu Yanchen's love for her, never realizing it was merely a promise he had made to Qin Nuanyuan. Su Mingyue then remembered that Gu Yanchen had never once taken care of their child. She had naively believed it was because he didn't like children. Only now did she realize it was Qin Nuanyuan who disallowed it. Su Mingyue's heart ached so much it felt like it was contracting. and she staggered weakly to the front desk. She registered and checked her own body. The doctor said she was fine, just overworked recently. She took some medicine and planned to go home to rest for a while. To her surprise, as soon as she arrived at her doorstep, she found her classmates from graduate school had all come. They had heard that Su Mingyue was going to Antarctica to participate in a human experiment and had come early to throw her a farewell party amid the joyful atmosphere. Someone had called Gu Yanchen. Fortunately, the event was kept confidential, and the classmates didn't reveal the specifics to Gu Yanchen, only mentioning it as a regular class gathering. This way, Gu Yanchen wouldn't know about Su Mingyue's plan to leave. But no one expected that not only would Gu Yanchen show up, but he also brought Qin Nuanyuan. He smiled and explained that Qin Nuanyuan had just graduated with her master's degree, and he brought her along to expand her network. Su Mingyue's gaze turned slightly cold. She didn't speak, just casually seated herself far away from them. Her friends broke the awkward silence first, bringing out the prepared gifts one by one and placing them in front of her. When it came to Gu Yanchen, his expression clearly showed some awkwardness, but under everyone's gaze, he still reached into his pocket, took out a small box, and handed it to Su Mingyue. It's a necklace. Su Mingyue's breath caught slightly. In her previous life, he had also given her one exactly like it. At the time, she was so excited that tears streamed down her face, believing it to be a token of love from Gu Yanchen. But many years later, she discovered that the back of the necklace was engraved with the name Qin Nuanyuan. Later, the necklace engraved with Qin Nuanyuan's name disappeared, replaced by a new one. At the time, she thought she must have been mistaken, but after seeing the necklace with the engraved name in Qin Nuanyuan's social media, she confirmed her memory. She didn't dwell on it and wore the necklace every day. That was until someone told her the necklace was a fake. The real one was the one worn by Qin Nuanyuan. Su Mingyue let out a soft sigh and pushed the necklace back. She took off the jade bracelet from her wrist and handed it over along with the other items. I don't need it. Her tone was indifferent. Return this bracelet to Aunt Gu as well. Gu Yanchen's face suddenly darkened, and he frowned, asking, what do you mean by this? Why are you making me return the family heirloom my mother gave you, Su Mingyue? Are you trying to get my mother to scold me again with this trick? He narrowed his eyes, a hint of mockery in his voice. Lately, you've been using this play hard to get tactic more and more. It's really disgusting. With that, he took Qin Wanwan's hand and walked away without a backward glance, not even giving her a chance to explain. Su Mingyue let out a cold laugh, her fingers gripping the glass, turning slightly pale. It turned out that all the words she had spoken were lies in Gu Yan's eyes. It turned out that her dignity was worth nothing in his eyes. Su Mingyue silently lowered her head and downed the red wine in her glass in one gulp. After the dinner party ended and everyone had gone their separate ways, Su Mingyue slowly made her way toward the parking lot. Just as she was about to walk to her car, a familiar voice came from a dark corner. Nuan Nuan, are you alright? Her steps faltered as she turned to look in the direction of the voice. It was Gu Yanchen. Her heart gave a violent squeeze. Immediately after, she heard a soft, plaintive voice, tinged with grievance and coquetry. Professor Gu, I feel awful. I don't know why, but my head is so dizzy. Su Mingyue's instinct was to leave, but the moment she took a step, her gaze was drawn to the scene before her. Qin Wanwan clung to Gu Yanchen, her body pressed flush against his, her face was flushed, and her hands roamed restlessly over him. Gu Yanchen's fingers curled slightly, his breathing uneven, restraining himself. He held Qin Wanwan by the shoulders, trying to push her away. Wanwan, what's wrong with you? Did you take something? His eyes carried a hint of restraint, his voice slightly hoarse. This is in the parking lot. I'll take you to the hospital. But Qin Nuanyuan tightly grasped his hand, her eyes hazy, and she spoke in a delicate voice. Teacher Gu, I feel so unwell right now. Gu Yanchen had been holding on to his rationality, but when he heard Qin Nuanyuan's soft, tender voice, he could no longer hold back, and without hesitation, he lowered his head and kissed her collarbone. In the dark corner of the parking lot, Qin Wanwan's ragged breaths suddenly filled the air. Su Mingyue stood not far away, her heart clenching tight. She couldn't help but think back to those days after her marriage. Every time she tried to get close, Gu Yanchen would push her away with impatience. Even their child was conceived only after Mrs. Gu drugged them on their wedding night. Su Mingyue had no idea that Gu Yanchen could be so out of control. She had always thought he was cold and restrained, uninterested in such matters, but now it seems, he's just not that. Into her, Su Mingyue gave a bitter smile, turned, and walked away, unwilling to watch any longer. When she got home, Gu Yanchen was already sitting by the door. His expression was gentler than usual. Seeing her return, he even handed her a glass of water, his tone uncharacteristically caring. You must be tired, have some water. Su Mingyue didn't want to take it, but she was truly parched, so she finally reached out, took it, and downed it in one gulp. Gu Yanchen, I'm not joking with you, I really don't want to marry you, there's no need for you to. Before she could finish, her body shuddered violently as a wave of scorching heat surged up from her stomach. Her fingers trembled, her consciousness began to blur, and she felt so weak she was on the verge of collapsing. Gu Yanchen merely crossed his arms, his gaze shifting from concern to anger. Su Mingyue, why did you drug Nuan Nuan today? Did you want to embarrass her, a girl? In front of everyone, Su Mingyue's mind went blank. She looked up at him in shock. Are you insane? Why on earth would I drug her? She was trembling with rage, but the feverish heat in her body was rapidly eroding her reason. Su Mingyue clenched her jaw and desperately scrambled backward, but Gu Yanchen kept pressing forward relentlessly. Now you know how it feels to be drugged. Huh, since you know it's unpleasant, why do you keep drugging me? Drugging me is one thing, but Nuanyuan merely accidentally broke your mother's watch, and you had to drug her too. Su Mingyue's pupils contracted sharply. She finally realized that Gu Yanchen's words were not a question, but a confirmation. Gu Yanchen had long believed it was her doing, and now he was here to exact revenge. Su Mingyue was shaking with anger. She clenched her fists tightly, trying to use the pain to stay clear-headed, but the drug's effects came on with a savage intensity, relentlessly eroding her sanity. Gu Yanchen's figure drew closer, his voice a low, hypnotic murmur laced with a mocking chill. Beg me, and I'll help you. Su Mingyue felt an instinctive disgust, forcing herself to endure the physical discomfort, and with her last shred of reason, she let out a cold laugh. Gu Yanchen, I didn't put any of the drugs there. I never realized that as a teacher, you lack any rational judgment, and why have you never been willing to believe me? Gu Yanchen's expression subtly changed, as if he hesitated for a moment, but Su Mingyue knew he wouldn't believe her. Her body was barely holding on, her consciousness a blur. She took a deep breath and suddenly slammed her head into the corner of a nearby table. The intense impact caused a sharp pain in her head, and blood slowly trickled down her forehead. Her vision finally cleared briefly, but that wasn't enough. She gritted her teeth and slammed into it again. Gu Yanchen's face suddenly changed, and a sharp pain shot through his heart. Trembling, he stepped forward, trying to grab her, but Su Mingyue, using her last bit of strength, pushed him away forcefully. Get out. Gu Yanchen was stunned, his heart clenched painfully as he watched Su Mingyue, her face covered in blood, desperately fighting to stay conscious and refusing to bow her head to him. Gu Yanchen, agitated, reached out to grab Su Mingyue, wanting to pull her into his arms, but Su Mingyue had already lost consciousness when Su Mingyue opened her eyes again. She was in a hospital room. Her forehead still ached faintly, and her body felt terribly weak due to the medication. You're awake. Su Mingyue turned her head and saw Gu Yanchen sitting by the bed. His beard was unkempt, his eyes bloodshot, clearly having stayed up all night. A cold laugh echoed in Su Mingyue's heart. Who is he putting on this act for? Mingyue. Gu Yanchen's voice was low and hoarse, his gaze flickering for a moment. Regarding Qin Wan Wan's situation, I've looked into it. What she drank last night was tainted. It has nothing to do with you. A brief silence fell over the ward. Su Mingyue remained silent, simply turning her head, her face expressionless. At that moment, the door to the ward was pushed open. Qin Nuanyuan was crying, her face tear-streaked, her eyes swollen like peaches. Rushed to Su Mingyue's side as soon as she entered, grabbing her sleeve. Mistress, I'm sorry, it was me who lost my reason last night, spoke nonsense, causing a misunderstanding between you and the teacher. She timidly glanced at Gu Yanchen, then carefully took out a round fan from her embrace. The fan ribs are made of fine white jade, and the fan surface is embroidered with exquisite hidden patterns on elegant silk. Qin Nuanyuan handed the round fan to Su Mingyue, her eyes filled with anticipation. You and the teacher are about to have a wedding. This round fan is hand-embroidered by me for you too. I hope you like it. The characters and patterns on this fan were embroidered by my own hand, stitch by stitch. Su Mingyue raised a delicate eyebrow and slowly accepted the round fan. Embroidered on the fan's surface were, unmistakably, the two characters Gu and Qin, the Gu for Gu Yanchen, and the Qin for Qin Wan Wan. In her previous life, Su Mingyue had also received this very same round fan. At the time, she didn't think much of it. She even considered it a precious token of sincerity, hand-embroidered by Gu Yanchen's student. But on the eve of her wedding, she happened to hold the fan up to the light and only then discovered its secret. Apart from those two glaring words, the entire pattern of the fan was a photo of Gu Yanchen and Qin Nuanyuan together. This made her feel uncomfortable, so she discussed it with Gu Yanchen. Could she avoid holding a fan embroidered with someone else's photo at her own wedding? When Gu Yanchen heard this, his expression suddenly turned cold. Nuan Nuan is my student. She just wanted to bless us this way. She spent so much time embroidering this for you. Why do you have to go against her? At every turn, Su Mingyue was trembling with anger. In the end, I took that fan at the wedding. Her thoughts snapped back to the present. Su Mingyue stared coldly at Qin Wanwan before her. Qin Wanwan, why are the characters Gu and Qin embroidered on the fan you gave me? Qin Wanwan's face paled slightly, yet she still offered a quiet explanation. Because, when I was designing the fan, I wasn't paying attention, and I accidentally embroidered my own name. I just wanted to wish your wedding in my own way, even though I'm not the main character of the wedding. I still want to be a part of it, she said, her tone gradually turning, and her eyes welling up again. Gu Yanchen saw this and his expression subtly changed. His gaze shifted between Su Mingyue and Qin Wanwan, his brow furrowing even deeper, as if he too sensed something off about Qin Wanwan's words. Su Mingyue tossed the round fan back into Qin Wanwan's arms. Since you're so eager to be part of the wedding, why don't you be the one to get married? An instant, deathly silence fell over the hospital room. Qin Nuanyuan's face suddenly turned pale, like a frightened deer, staring unblinkingly at Gu Yanchen. Mr. Gu. Gu Yanchen looked at Su Mingyue in shock, his face full of disapproval. Mingyue, what are you talking about? Su Mingyue merely gave a cold smile, her gaze fixed on Qin Nuanyuan. Isn't she eager to be part of the wedding? Then why not let her be your bride? Gu Yanchen's brows furrowed deeply, his eyes filled with impatience. Su Mingyue, are you crazy? I'm Qin Nuanyuan's teacher, and this goes against all professional ethics. Su Mingyue let out a cold laugh, her eyes showing no trace of emotion. Teacher's ethics? Are you making excuses for yourself, or justifying your shameless behavior? Gu Yanchen was stunned, not fully understanding what she meant. Seeing Gu Yanchen like this, Su Mingyu couldn't be bothered to explain. Qin Nuanu sneered as she spoke, since Miss Qin is so fond of this fan, you can keep it for your own wedding. I certainly won't be taking it. Gu Yanchen frowned, his tone sharpening. Su Mingyue, what on earth are you making a scene about? I don't want to marry you, and I don't want to hold this embarrassing fan. Hearing Su Mingyue's words, Gu Yanchen felt a sudden tightness in his chest. He had never seen Su Mingyue look so serious. He thought and thought, trying to figure out the reason behind Su Mingyue's change in mood. After a while, he finally understood. Gu Yanchen felt that it was because he had been neglecting Su Mingyue's feelings and thoughts lately, which was why she was acting this way. At this thought, Gu Yanchen sighed and softened his tone. Mingyue, stop being difficult. Once our parents have made the formal proposal, we'll get married right away. After the wedding, I'll make sure to be more attentive to your feelings. Don't make unreasonable demands anymore. Su Mingyue offered no reply, merely watching him in silence, her expression unreadable. At that moment, Gu Yanchen caught sight of Qin Wanwan still holding the round fan and let out a soft sigh. Wanwan, since Mingyue doesn't care for it, there's no need to use this fan. Qin Wanwan was somewhat displeased, but she nodded obediently nonetheless. Her gaze towards Su Mingyue was filled with venom. Su Mingyue didn't want to get entangled with the two any further and dismissed them. You can leave now. I'm not feeling well. Gu Yanchen urged Su Mingyue to rest well before leaving with Qin Nuanyuan. But not long after, Qin Nuanyuan turned back and returned to the ward. Su Mingyue, I saw you yesterday when I was with the teacher. You saw it all, didn't you? You saw how the teacher took me, how rough he was. Su Mingyue looked at Qin Wanwan's smug expression with a surge of disgust. So what? Qin Wanwan sneered, crossing her arms. Actually, I was the one who drugged myself yesterday. I just wanted to test the teacher. I didn't expect he truly has feelings for me. Su Mingyue's gaze darkened, a hint of disdain flashing in her eyes. She had long known that Qin Nuanyuan merely wanted to win Gu Yanchen's heart through this game. She was merely showcasing herself repeatedly, asserting her dominance in this love triangle. Oh, then I wish you happiness. Qin Wanwan was extremely displeased that she hadn't managed to provoke Su Mingyue into anger. Her face contorted, and she practically shrieked. Su Mingyue, what exactly are you pretending to be? Do you think that by pretending not to care, Teacher Gu will get scared and come running back to you? What do you mean by wishing me happiness? You know perfectly well that Teacher Gu's intended marriage partner is you, yet here you are, making these snide remarks. Her tone grew increasingly biting. Don't think your hot and cold act these past days will win Teacher Gu's heart. He will always take care of me. You're just the woman he was forced to marry. Upon hearing these words, a wave of indescribable emotion surged in Su Mingyue's heart. However, Qin Wanwan had no intention of letting the matter drop. She gave a signal, and several burly men quickly entered the room. Su Mingyue, let's see this time if Teacher Gu chooses you or me. When Su Mingyue regained consciousness again, she found herself and Qin Nuanyuan dumped in a dark, damp warehouse. Several kidnappers stood not far away, sneering with malicious glints in their eyes. Qin Nuanyuan moved closer to Su Mingyue, as if confident of her victory. Guess who Teacher Gu will choose, you or me? if we're both kidnapped. After saying that, she had the burly men force her into a chair. No sooner had this been done than Gu Yanchen's urgent voice rang out from outside the door. Nguyen Nguyen, where are you? Gu Yanchen burst in, visibly startled upon seeing Su Mingyue. The kidnapper spoke up, Mr. Gu, your charm is truly irresistible. Both of these ladies love you deeply, but today you can only save one. The other one will be left for my brothers to enjoy. Hearing this, Gu Yanchen's gaze shifted between Su Mingyue and Qin Nuanyuan. His expression complicated. Qin Nuanyuan's eyes were red, almost choking as she called out, Gu Yanchen. Gu Yanchen frowned, looked at Su Mingyue, and sighed, Mingyue, I'll come to save you later, just wait for me. After saying that, he directly carried Qin Nuanyuan away. Qin Nuanyuan turned back and looked at Su Mingyue provocatively, her eyes full of triumph. Su Mingyue watched his every move, and a sense of self-mockery rose in her heart. She let out a cold laugh and turned to face the burly men. How much is Qin Nuanyuan paying you? I'll double it. Her words hung in the air, met with only silence. Instead, the men advanced toward her, their expressions growing even more menacing. Su Mingyue frowned and struggled just as the burly men closed in. Gu Yanchen suddenly returned, seeing the scene. He rushed toward Su Mingyue with anxious eyes. What do you guys want? Stay away from Mingyue. But just as he was about to take Su Mingyue away, Qin Nuanyuan suddenly screamed, help. Gu Yanchen's face changed, he gritted his teeth, and immediately turned to run out. Su Mingyue could only watch Gu Yanchen's retreating figure, a chill rising in her heart. It turned out that no matter what happened, Gu Yanchen would always choose Qin Nuanyuan. Several burly men lunged at Su Mingyue, and before she lost consciousness, she could only hear Gu Yanchen's desperate shout, when I opened my eyes again, I was back in the hospital. Su Mingyue groggily regained consciousness and found she was still fully dressed. Gu Yanchen sat by the bedside, his expression stiff. Mingyue, I'm sorry, I didn't choose you first, but I made sure they didn't lay a finger on you. It's a good thing I saved you and kept you from getting hurt. You'll still be able to look beautiful for the wedding in a few days. Su Mingyue looked at him coldly, finding the whole thing rather absurd even at a time like this. Gu Yanchen was still thinking about their marriage. Seeing Su Mingyue's silence, Gu Yanchen sighed, my parents will come to propose the marriage tonight. Let's just get married, consider it a resolution for you. Hearing his words, Su Mingyue felt her heart turn to ashes. She had no energy left for arguments. With a cold nod, she simply accepted everything. Gu Yanchen watched her, a flicker of complex emotion passing through his eyes. He had thought marrying her would make him angry, but now, he found himself inexplicably excited by the prospect of their impending marriage. He struggled to accept the complex emotions welling up inside him. Gu Yanchen walked to the window, trying to clear his tangled thoughts. Su Mingyue took the opportunity to leave and took a taxi to the place she had agreed upon with her mentor. That evening, Gu Yanchen's parents arrived on time, ready to propose marriage. However, when they pushed the door open, they were met with an empty room. Su Mingyue was not inside. Only a servant stood by the doorway. Where is Su Mingyue? Gu Yanchen's face darkened instantly, a sense of foreboding washing over him. Mr. Gu, our young lady has made her position clear. She does not wish to marry you. In an instant, everyone was frozen in place to make this marriage proposal as grand and ceremonious as possible. Mr. and Mrs. Gu had specially invited the most respected elders of the family, and even close business partners. A group of over a dozen people stood outside Su Mingyue's door, looking at each other in awkward silence. Gu Fu's face was extremely grim, and he couldn't help but speak in a hushed tone to Gu Qingyan. Qingyan, what's going on here? Didn't you say you had already calmed Mingyue down? Now that all the uncles and elders are here, yet she refuses to show herself. Is she trying to humiliate us completely? Gu Qingyan's expression was also deeply sullen. He reached for his phone and dialed Su Mingyue directly. However, the phone rang several times, all ending in a dead tone. Gu Qingyan frowned. He immediately called Su Mingyue's friends, but everyone gave the same answer. I don't know. His breathing grew involuntarily ragged, a nameless dread taking root and swelling in his chest. In contrast, his parents remained far calmer than he was, though their expressions were still grave. His mother's eyes were slightly red-rimmed, her tone tinged with unconcealed disappointment. Qingyan, Mingyue called us a few days ago to call off the engagement. She even asked for her jade bracelet back. Does this mean she's truly decided against the marriage? Gu Qingyan's face finally darkened completely, his brows furrowed tightly. He recalled this period, Su Mingyue's hesitation and cold detachment, and a dull pain throbbed in his heart. Gu's mother sighed. Qingyan, what exactly have you done to Mingyue? She used to adore you so much, always following you around, and now she's actually refusing the proposal. Gu Fu paced anxiously beside him, his face as dark as water. Qingyan, I once promised Mingyue's father that I would take good care of her, so at that time, I arranged your engagement. Now Mingyue doesn't want to marry you. What do you think we should do now? Gu Qingyan took a step back, a flicker of bewilderment in his eyes. Yet, Su Mingyue's diary clearly stated that all her wishes culminated in marrying him. How could she be unwilling now? Impossible. Su Mingyue has liked me since we were children. How could she not want to marry me? A note of disbelief tinged Gu Qingyan's voice, but as soon as he finished saying this, he suddenly froze in his mind. He recalled Su Mingyue's cold gaze towards him in recent days. He remembered her indifferent expression when she caught him being close to Qin Momo. His chest felt so tight he could barely breathe. Gu Qingyan could bear it no longer. He shoved past the servant and stormed straight into Su Mingyue's room, but when he stood in the center of the room, his face completely changed. The room was spotless, every trace of him was gone. The gift he once gave to Su Mingyue was gone. The photo frame of him and Su Mingyue had disappeared. Even the traces he had left unintentionally were meticulously erased. Gu Qingyan stood still, his fingers tightening involuntarily. His knuckles turned white as a sudden, unprecedented wave of irritation washed over him. Why had Su Mingyue, who once tried every trick in the book to marry him, vanished without a trace? His gaze grew pained. Could it be because of last night's kidnapping, because he chose to save Qin Nuanyuan instead of her? A shock ran through him, and his face grew even grimmer. The suffocating feeling in his chest was driving him mad. But just then, a cool female voice broke the silence. Mom and Dad, are you here to propose to me? Hearing this, Gu Yanchen's heart skipped a beat, and a flicker of joy unexpectedly arose. He almost instinctively turned around. He had originally planned to scold Su Mingyue for not being at home and causing such a big farce with the servants, but when he finally saw the person at the door, he froze completely. It wasn't Su Mingyue standing there, it was Qin Nuanyuan in a wedding dress. She stood shyly at the door, her cheeks slightly flushed, holding the same round fan she had during the day. All eyes turned to her. Qin Nuanyuan seemed a bit uneasy, clutching the hem of her wedding dress, her voice soft. Yanchen, my dad said you've been waiting outside for over half an hour, and Sister Mingyue still hasn't shown up. He was afraid you'd be too embarrassed, so he asked me to step in and save the situation, so the Gu family wouldn't lose face. By the end, her cheeks were even redder, her voice soft and shy as she asked, Mom and Dad, if Sister Mingyue really doesn't come, then, can I marry Yanchen, please? The air froze in an instant. Gu's mother's face darkened instantly. What are you talking nonsense about? Gu's mother slammed the table hard, her cold gaze fixed on Qin Nuanyuan. Who are you calling Mom and Dad? You're not even close to being worthy of addressing us. If Mingyue doesn't show up today, it's on us Gu family for letting her down. But what do you mean by coming out in a wedding dress? Are you trying to make our Gu family the laughingstock, saying our son is fickle and unfaithful? Qin Nuanyuan's face turned pale instantly, and her eyes reddened in an instant, clutching pitifully at Gu Yanchen's sleeve, her voice trembling with unshed tears. Yanchen, I'm sorry, I just wanted to. Gu Yanchen's brow furrowed, a wave of inexplicable irritation washing over him. Mom, she's just my student. She's young and didn't know any better. Just came here to help. Why are you yelling at her? Besides, there's nothing going on between us. What's the point of taking your anger out on Nuanyuan? A sudden realization seemed to dawn on the father, his face instantly paling. Gu Yanchen, this girl, she's your student, isn't she? I've covered up the gossip about you two more than once. How dare you claim your feelings for her are pure? With those words, the entire atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Qin Nuanyuan abruptly fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She shook her head frantically, her voice choked with sobs as she cried out, No, it's not Mr. Gu's fault. It was me who liked Mr. Gu. I was the one who pursued him relentlessly. I begged him to be with me. Please don't blame him. Don't hurt him. She was crying too hard to speak, looking utterly terrified that Gu Yanchen would be punished, but the expressions on everyone's faces in the room shifted. Absurd. The mother was completely enraged. She glared at Gu Yanchen, her voice trembling. Gu Yanchen, you still have an engagement with Mingyu, yet you're entangled with another woman during your engagement period. At that moment, the guests present began to whisper among themselves. They had never seen Su Mingyu before, nor did they know who Gu Yanchen's real fiancé was. Only seeing this scene, assuming it was the mother-in-law deliberately making things difficult because she didn't approve of the daughter-in-law, Gu's father and mother exchanged a glance, their faces equally grim. After a long pause, Gu's father surprisingly spoke up, Forget it, since today is the betrothal ceremony and things have reached this point, it doesn't matter who the bride is, why don't we just let Qin Nuanyuan take her place? Mrs. Gu was taken aback for a moment and whispered, But we already promised Mingyue. Mr. Gu snorted coldly, casting a meaningful glance around the assembled guests before lowering his voice. Our Gu family has business dealings with all these families. If we make too big a scene today and lose face, it's our contracts that will suffer. However, just as this preposterous farce of swapping the bride was about to be settled, Gu Yanchen suddenly furrowed his brow tightly and spoke. No. Even if this proposal is just for show, it can't be Wan. Father Gu was growing impatient by now, his expression chillingly cold. Gu Yanchen, isn't this what you wanted? What's with the act now? As soon as these words were spoken, the room fell silent for a moment. Gu Yanchen's fingertips tightened slightly. He remained silent for a long time before finally speaking slowly. Maybe Mingyue is just throwing a tantrum today. If I really propose to Nuanyuan, and Mingyue finds out, she would be sad, wouldn't she? Besides, this isn't just a matter of marriage. The expressions on everyone's faces shifted. However, Father Gu discerned a deeper meaning in his words and frowned, asking, "What do you mean?" Gu Yanchen continued, "Although everyone hasn't met Mingyue, they all know her age through business dealings with Uncle Su. Nuan is so much younger than her. Can we really pull this off? If they think the Gu family broke the engagement from back then and acted without integrity, wouldn't that be even more embarrassing than the current situation?" Upon hearing this, Father Gu fell silent. After a long moment of thought, he finally gave a nod, but as he looked at the betrothal gifts strewn across the floor and then at the grim-faced business elders behind him, Gu Yanchen cleared his throat, his voice steady. "My apologies, uncles. Today, our Gu family has been inconsiderate. I didn't coordinate the time with Mingyue in advance. I didn't expect her to be out with her sisters and temporarily not at home." He paused slightly and continued sincerely, "I sincerely apologize for wasting everyone's time today. As compensation, we are willing to offer a 10% discount on the subsequent contract. We hope you can understand." The elders, who had initially looked displeased, finally showed some relief upon hearing this. They exchanged glances, eventually nodded, and said no more. After pacifying these business tycoons, Qi Nuanyuan remained standing in place, her eyes red with tears. She lowered her head, gripping the hem of her wedding dress tightly. "Mr. Gu, do you not like my outfit today?" Gu Yanchen frowned, his eyes restless as he looked up. "How could I? You look beautiful today." Qi Nuanyuan bit her lip and asked softly, "Then why, when today was the best opportunity, were you still unwilling to let me marry you? Was rejecting me today really just for the sake of business?" She looked up at him, her gaze timid and uncertain. Gu Yanchen paused, his expression turning slightly cold, nodded without hesitation. "Of course, after all, we can't let those business elders think I'm untrustworthy." Qi Nuanyuan lowered her head, biting her lip, her voice even softer. "But, Teacher Gu, I always feel like you've become very fond of Sister Mingyue now." Gu Yanchen seemed to hear something utterly ridiculous, his voice rising sharply. "How could I possibly like her?" As he spoke, he seemed amused, a faint smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "She's been following me around since we were kids, like a little shadow I could never shake. When she cried as a child, her face would be a mess of snot and tears, and she'd insist I wipe it for her. Drove me absolutely crazy." Gu Yanchen rambled on, his tone laced with annoyance and even a touch of distant reminiscence, but he didn't even realize it himself, as he kept saying hateful things, yet the upward curve of his lips grew wider and wider. Qi Nuanyuan watched this scene, her fists clenched tightly. She held back, eventually lowering her head, her voice barely audible. "I hope Teacher Gu will never like Su Mingyue." Gu Yanchen shook his head without hesitation, his tone indifferent. "Of course, I will never like her." But after saying it, he hesitated for a moment for no apparent reason. He frowned, a strange feeling flickering in his heart. It seemed that something was subtly changing. The farce finally came to an end, but Gu Yanchen felt inexplicably restless. Instinctively, he reached out to a few acquaintances, hoping to get news about Su Mingyue, but still came up empty-handed. After thinking it over, he could only dial the phone of the friend who had invited him to the class reunion. The call connected. The other party, upon hearing his question, sounded thoroughly surprised. "Mingyue, she left long ago, didn't she tell you?" Gu Yanchen was stunned, his brows furrowing. "What do you mean?" The classmate on the other end of the phone exclaimed in surprise. "She went to Antarctica. She's participating in a classified project and will be in Antarctica for decades. Don't you know?" This statement struck Gu Yanchen like a thunderbolt, leaving his mind completely blank. Su Mingyue went to Antarctica for 10 years. Gu Yanchen tightly gripped his phone, his voice hoarse, almost forcing the words out. "Are you sure? Is she really staying for 10 years? The classmate on the other end of the phone hesitated for a moment before slowly speaking. "I shouldn't really be telling you this. The agreement signed at the time was for 10 years, and if she performs exceptionally well, it Could be even longer. Gu Yanchen's mind buzzed. He almost staggered back a step, his face as pale as a ghost. 10 years. How much did Su Mingyue not want to marry him to make such a decisive choice? Even she didn't bother to say a word to him before disappearing. At this moment, Gu's mother also noticed his unusual behavior. Yanchen, where exactly did Mingyue go? Gu Yanchen's throat tightened. After a long while, he stiffly uttered a few words. She joined the Antarctic research team, for over 10 years. As soon as these words were spoken, Gu's mother's face turned ashen. She quickly grabbed the table beside her. She, a little girl, going to such a distant place for 10 years. How can she possibly live well? Can she endure it? The more she spoke, the more panicked she became, her eyes turning red. It's my fault. I'm sorry for Jia, for not taking good care of their daughter. That's why she had to suffer so far away. Gu's father's expression also changed, as if he had suddenly remembered something. When Mingyue came back the other day, something was definitely off. Even though she was as affectionate with us as she was when she was little, you could clearly sense a distance beneath that warmth. Madame Gu also suddenly remembered something. That's right. Whenever we brought up Yanchen, she would always smile and change the subject, never willing to talk about him. Mingyue must have made up her mind to leave long ago. Gu Yanchen stood rooted to the spot, frozen. Stiff, his mind was in complete disarray. All the memories seemed to have been forcefully shoved into his mind, replaying frantically. Su Mingyue said she didn't want to marry him. Su Mingyue repeatedly refused and kept avoiding his gaze. But what about him? Back then, he thought she was just being difficult and deliberately opposing him. He even mocked her bitterly. He ridiculed her, calling her a clingy kid who used to cry and beg to marry him, asking if she thought she could benefit from marrying him. Only now does he realize that she had completely given up on him. Back then it felt like someone had stabbed him in the chest, the pain almost taking his breath away. How could he be so stupid as to not see that she didn't want to marry him at all? His mind was reeling, his vision darkening, and he blurted out, I need to find Mingyue. Gu's mother was startled by his sudden outburst and quickly grabbed him. Are you crazy? She's gone. But Gu Yanchen's eyes were bloodshot and terrifying. I don't believe it. She couldn't be that heartless. She must come back. As if possessed, he spun around and charged out the door. Yanchen, Mrs. Gu rushed to stop him, but it was futile. With trembling fingers, Gu Yanchen called every friend he knew, desperately trying to find out Su Mingyue's whereabouts. After much effort, I finally found a classmate who had applied for the project with Su Mingyue. I asked urgently, which research station is she at? I need to go find her. The person was taken aback, almost disbelieving, and repeated, Mr. Gu, did you get something wrong? Gu Yanchen frowned, his tone impatient. What do you mean? The classmate fell silent for a moment, as if hesitating whether to speak, but eventually sighed. The project Mingyue joined, it's a state-level classified program. She signed an agreement. For 10 years, she absolutely cannot return to the country, let alone casually disclose her location. Gu Yanchen's mind went blank for a moment, his hands and feet turning cold. Impossible. How could she possibly do something like that? She must have had a moment of madness, thinking I'd upset her, and just impulsively ran off to Antarctica. In a few days, once she comes to her senses, she'll be begging to come back. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, then the classmate said quietly, Professor Gu, I think you must be mistaken. Mingyue applied for this program 3 years ago. She went through countless evaluations and gave it her all to secure this spot. It wasn't a decision made on a whim. Moreover, last week was her final confirmation about joining the project. She was very determined, saying I must go, and even wanted to apply for a longer-term Antarctic residency program. It was only because she had a fiancé that we gently persuaded her to sign a 10-year agreement instead of a lifetime one. Gu Yanchen was completely frozen in shock. Last week was the day he deeply connected with Su Mingyue, and it was also the day Su Mingyue personally proposed to annul the engagement. He still remembers that morning. He acted on impulse and said things he shouldn't have to her. She didn't argue or make a scene, not even her expression changed. She just quietly looked at him. He thought she was just pouting, but looking back now, she wasn't pouting at all. She had made up her mind to leave him for good. Gu Yanchen felt icy cold all over, his vision darkening, and even breathing became difficult. He had thought she was just throwing a tantrum. So what happened? She had no intention of marrying him and was even prepared not to return for 10 years, or even longer. Gu Yanchen's fingertips tightened gradually, his knuckles turning white. He thought that as long as he turned back, she would always be waiting in the same place, but now, she had completely moved on. When he got home, the living room was completely silent. His mother was taken aback for a moment when she saw him come in. She couldn't help but peer over his shoulder. as if looking for someone. Gu's mother's voice carried a tentative note as she asked, Mingyue. Gu Yanchen's throat felt dry, and he struggled to open his mouth. But no words came out at that moment. Gu's father emerged from the study. He looked at Gu Yanchen and patted his shoulder. Anyway, Mingyue is now representing the country on a project and won't be able to return in the short term. You're at the age where you should settle down, and you can't wait for her that long. I've discussed this with the shareholders, and we've decided to cancel the engagement with the Su family. They have no objections. Starting tomorrow, we'll find you a suitable match. Gu Yanchen's fingers gave a sudden, involuntary twitch. Call off the engagement. His mind went completely blank, and he staggered back a step. Call it off. Yes. His father's tone was calm. Since she's not here, you don't need to wait any longer. A sharp pain shot through Gu Yanchen's chest. No, no. Gu Yanchen suddenly looked up and instinctively retorted. But didn't you promise to wait for her return? And I promised Mingyue's father that I would take care of Mingyue. If her project goes well, she might be back in 7 or 8 years. By then, seeing that our engagement has been cancelled, how much pain would she endure? You really are full of yourself, Gu Yanchen. I've looked into it. She signed a 10-year contract. There's no way she'll be back early. She went on her own accord. Not because she was forced. She never wanted to marry you and has long since completely given up on you. If that's the case, why would she care whether you marry someone else? Because she doesn't like you at all. Those words were like a sharp knife, piercing straight into Gu Yanchen's heart. He froze completely. She doesn't like me at all. He tightened his fingers slightly, forcing himself to stay calm. If she doesn't like me, then so be it. He never liked her to begin with. It was an arranged marriage from the start. Marrying into a more powerful family would actually be even more advantageous for us. But then why? Why didn't he feel the slightest bit of relief? Instead, his chest felt tight and heavy. Seeing his prolonged silence, Father Gu frowned and said in a low voice, You know your Uncle Zhang, right? His daughter just returned from abroad. I think she's quite suitable. The two of you should meet. Gu Yanchen shook his head. I don't want to marry anyone else. And I can't marry anyone else. Father Gu's face darkened instantly. Gu Yanchen, what on earth is wrong with you? You clearly don't love Mingyue either. Now that you're not being forced to marry her, and a better option has been left for you, why aren't you happy about it? Weren't you the one who hated this marriage arrangement the most? Gu Yanchen didn't speak. He just stood there, his heart pounding violently. He had always thought Su Mingyue was a burden since childhood, so why? The thought of spending the rest of his life with another woman made him feel suffocated. Yanchen, Gu's mother's gentle voice broke the silence. You don't want to meet Uncle Zhang's daughter. Is it because you like Qin Nuanyuan? If you want to marry her, Mom has no objections. Gu Yanchen shook his head instinctively. I don't want to marry Qin Nuanyuan. Who do you want to marry? Su Mingyue. As soon as the words left his mouth, even he was stunned. The living room fell into an instant silence. Mr. and Mrs. Gu froze simultaneously, staring at him with utter disbelief. After a long pause, Mrs. Gu asked in a low voice, But, haven't you always disliked her? She hesitated, then ventured cautiously, Do you want to marry her because you've recently realized you love her? Or, is it just an obsession? Gu Yanchen's pupils contracted slightly, and his breath hitched. Love, how could that be? He detests Su Mingyue the most, yet he discovered he was utterly incapable of answering his mother's question. He couldn't even bring himself to utter the word hate. For the first time, his resolve began to waver. Su Mingyue must have been playing some kind of hard-to-get game recently, filling his head with illusions. It must be because he hadn't seen Nuan for so long that he was having these inexplicable feelings for Mingyue. He had to go find Nuan. Seeing her would help him understand his own heart. However, after he found out where Nuan was and walked into the bar, he was stunned. Qin Nuanyuan was wearing a miniskirt, lazily leaning against the man's embrace, her long, fair legs resting on his knees. She was completely different from her usual self. The man's hand brazenly slid over the top of her thigh, eliciting a soft, coquettish laugh from her. The crowd laughed and egged her on, with one person asking, Nuan, you were even wearing a wedding dress yesterday. How come you still haven't landed? Gu Yanchen, didn't you say you were determined to marry into the Gu family and become a glamorous rich wife? When are you going to seal the deal? Don't forget to take your sisters along for the good life. Qin Nuanyuan curled her lips into a smile, her tone brimming with smugness. Halfway there, if he's willing to sleep with me, how could he not like me? You have no idea. She swirled the glass lazily, her eyes full of disdain. His fiancée, Su Mingyue, chases after him every day, but he's never touched her. I bet he thinks Su Mingyue is old and unattractive, not worth touching, and that stupid woman went off to do some Antarctic research project. She won't be back for over a decade. Does she really think Gu Yanchen will wait for her? The people around burst into laughter. Someone asked in confusion, but, Nuan Nuan, how on earth did you manage to win over Teacher Gu? Qin Nuan Nuan smiled smugly. How else? By doing things to hurt myself, of course, and then pinning it all on Su Mingyue. You have no idea. Every time Su Mingyue tried to deny it in front of Gu Yanchen, all I had to do was get my eyes a little teary, and he'd immediately blame the whole mess on her. He would even comfort me tenderly and stand up for me, she said, then let out a low, dark chuckle, her eyes brimming with malice. Oh, and I even drugged him once. Something in Gu Yanchen's mind seemed to shatter. He froze on the spot, his fingers tightening unconsciously. In the chaos that day, I ended up sleeping with him. Afterwards, he actually thought Su Mingyue was the one who drugged him and went to confront her, to prove her innocence. Su Mingyue even ended up hurting herself. So, what happened in the end? Of course, to make Teacher Gu dislike her even more. Later, I made a show of being pitiful, got Teacher Gu to buy Su Mingyue's favorite thing himself, destroyed it in front of her, and then pretended to be pitiful and begged her. That way, Teacher Gu would feel sorry for me and blame Su Mingyue for being immature. Oh, right. Guess who Teacher Gu ended up saving in the kidnapping I staged? Yesterday, the people around her laughed. You, of course, exactly. Qin Nuan Nuan's eyes gleamed with smug satisfaction. What a shame, though. He moved too fast and ruined my whole plan. My original plan was to have those men ruin Su Mingyue, so Gu Yanchen would see her as tainted and finally let her go. Unfortunately, the plan failed, but it's fine, I have other methods. She hooked her finger under the chin of the man beside her and leaned in for a kiss. Gu Yanchen is already falling for me, and there's no other woman by his side now. If I can just get my father to whisper in his ear one more time, the position of the young mistress of the Gu family will be mine sooner or later. Bang! The sudden, deafening noise made everyone whirl around in shock. The bar's music was abruptly cut off. Gu Yanchen stood at the entrance, watching the whole farce unfold. Qin Nuan Nuan had frozen completely. It wasn't until the person beside her gave her a nudge that she snapped back to reality. Flustered, she scrambled to her feet from the man's lap, her face deathly pale. Mr. Gu, what are you doing here? Qin Nuan Nuan tugged self-consciously at her short skirt, then guiltily lowered her head. Gu Yanchen's gaze was sharp as a blade, fixed intently on her. The next second, he abruptly seized her by the wrist. The people around them gasped in alarm, hastily backing away. The bar fell into a terrifying silence under the dim, yellowish light. Only Gu Yanchen remained, his cold stare fixed on Qin Nuanyuan. There was no trace of the warmth of the past in her eyes, only an unfathomable rage. Qin Nuanyuan, his voice was barely audible. You've had a great time deceiving me all these years, haven't you? Qin Nuanyuan was frozen stiff. She had never seen Gu Yanchen look at her with such a gaze, as if he wanted to devour her alive. She had never imagined that one day Gu Yanchen would speak to her in such a tone. Teacher Gu, it hurts. This remark caught Gu Yanchen off guard. In his mind, he suddenly flashed back to the first time he met Qin Nuan Nuan. Back then, he was still a graduate student. Before graduating, he went to his advisor's home for dinner. Qin Nuanyuan had just started college, as innocent as a blank sheet of paper. She followed behind him, calling him Teacher Gu with every word, her sweet smile making it hard not to feel protective. At first, he really treated her like a sister, but later, she followed him around all day, even choosing the same major. After Qin Nuan became his student, they spent more and more time together. He gradually got used to her presence, even thinking he loved her. But, if it was love, why did he feel only anger, not the pain of heartbreak? When the truth was revealed, why, at this moment, was it someone else who truly made his chest feel heavy? The stubborn face flashed before his eyes. The scenes he had ignored now came flooding back in overwhelming waves. Su Mingyue stood in the cold wind, scolded coldly by him, yet she stubbornly refused to shed a tear. Su Mingyue was misunderstood, her eyes filled with despair as she looked at him, but he chose to believe others and turned away. Time and again, she suffered Qin Nuanyuan's bullying, yet he always took her side. How utterly desperate must she have felt? Professor Gu. Qin Nuanyuan's voice carried a faint tremor. She felt his grip tightening, her wrist almost crushed. Don't do this, I'm sorry, please, for my father's sake. Her voice trembled with a sob. Father. Gu Yanchen's eyes instantly turned icy cold. If it weren't for her father constantly whispering in his ear, bad-mouthing Su Mingyue, how could he have grown to despise Su Mingyue so much? He abruptly let go of his grip. Qin Nuanyuan stumbled back a few steps and fell to the ground in a disheveled heap. Gu Yanchen looked down at her, his voice breaking. Qin Nuan Nuan, don't ever show your face in front of me again. I've helped you more than enough over the years. His eyes held nothing but cold indifference and disgust. With that, he turned and walked away without a backward glance. Qin Yuan slumped to the ground, staring blankly at his retreating figure. She panicked, crying and reaching out. Gu Yanchen, don't leave, Gu Yanchen. But the man didn't even turn his head. Back home, the room was pitch black, and Gu Yanchen's chest ached so much it felt like he was suffocating. He had wanted some time alone, but as he walked into the living room, he found his parents sorting through some paintings. Mom, did you guys buy these new paintings? He walked over, his gaze falling on the paintings. When he saw the signature, his pupils suddenly contracted. These were all painted by Su Mingyue. You weren't always reluctant to look, were you? Gu's mother sighed. So we kept them in the basement all this time, thinking we'd bring them out after you and Mingyue got married. Gu Yanchen's breath caught in his throat. His hand trembled as he reached out to turn the pages of the drawings. Every single one was a portrait of him, painted by Su Mingyue's own hand. He stood on the podium, furrowed his brow in thought, and lowered his head to read. Even the way he spaced out, she meticulously sketched it out. She painted his entire youth, but he never once looked at it. What truly took his breath away was the discovery of a letter hidden behind each painting. He opened the first one, and the handwriting inside was elegant and familiar. Gu Yanchen, I watched you secretly again all day today. You never knew, did you? The first time I fell for you was because of a math problem you solved. I've been waiting for you, but it seems you'll never turn back to look at me. Gu Yanchen's eyes instantly welled up with tears. He unfolded them one by one, each drawing hiding the unspoken feelings Su Mingyue had never expressed. She had loved him for so many years, yet he had never truly cherished her. He covered his eyes as tears finally broke free and streamed down his face. When Gu Yanchen turned to the final painting, he discovered a small box hidden within it. His heart gave a violent lurch. This box, why does it look so familiar? His hands trembling, he opened it. Inside was the necklace he had forced Su Mingyue to accept earlier. At the bottom of the box, there was a line of small text. Gu Yanchen, I always thought that even if you didn't love me, at least you didn't hate me, but I never expected that all these years. The things you gave me were all fakes. From now on, we are done. Gu Yanchen's mind went blank, and he suddenly fell to the ground, his fingers trembling so much that he couldn't even hold the box. It finally dawned on him that Su Mingyue had long since given up on him completely. He would never see her look back at him again. An overwhelming wave of agony washed over him. His vision went black, and he collapsed to the ground. Gu Yanchen had been unconscious for a full 7 days. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was his parents keeping vigil by his bedside. His mother's eyes were red and swollen, while his father's face was etched with exhaustion, his gaze filled with deep concern. Yet, at that moment, his mind was completely consumed by that incredibly vivid dream, and his heart gave a sharp, painful pang. He slightly opened his mouth, his throat unbearably dry, and with great difficulty, he uttered his first words, Mom, I dreamed of Mingyue. His eyes were unfocused, his voice trembling. I married her. But everything in the dream was more terrifying than hell. In the dream, he married Su Mingyue, yet even after they became husband and wife, he remained cold and distant toward her. He even wrote 55 letters to Qin Yuan after the marriage, each word dripping with longing. He never showed Su Mingyue a shred of warmth. When Su Mingyue prepared meals for him with her own hands, he looked upon them with disdain. Su Mingyue handled everything for him, yet he turned a blind eye to it all. He never even held their child in his own arms, let alone helped with their studies. When the child called him daddy for the very first time, he felt nothing but disgust. With a cold face, he said, Don't call me that. But what about Su Mingyue? She continued to walk by his side in silence through all those long years, quietly keeping the home, quietly loving him. Back then, Su Mingyue believed that even a little warmth could eventually melt his heart, yet he never once turned to look at her. Decades later, when he was over 80 and nearing the end of his life, Qin Yuanyuan appeared again. She was in her 60s, her face aged, and her husband's company was in crisis. Gu Yanchen, only after his death did he learn the truth. The company owned by Qin Yuanyuan's husband was never in crisis. It was all a lie. She had been deceiving him from the very beginning. She lived a life of luxury with his money, while his family was pushed into an abyss. The most terrifying part was that Su Mingyue, after seeing the letters he wrote to Qin Yuanyuan, ended up in grave danger because of it. After they found out about my feelings for Qin Yuanyuan, they were terrified that Su Mingyue would snatch the inheritance, so they pushed her right off the building. She plummeted with a scream, her blood instantly staining the ground crimson. He watched it happen, powerless, then charged forward like a madman, desperate to grab her, to save her, but he was utterly helpless. He could only watch helplessly as she died. Then, he woke up from the nightmare. Gu Yanchen's face was as pale as paper, his body slightly Trembling, his eyes filled with lingering fear, instinctively, he reached for his neck, only to find the jade pendant that had accompanied him for years still hanging there. He let out a sigh of relief, gripping tightly, and suddenly looked up at his father. Mom, so this jade pendant is from Mingyue. Gu's mother patted his shoulder and slowly spoke. Yanchen, now that things have come to this, I won't keep Mingyue's secret anymore. The jade pendant around your neck is something Mingyue obtained for you by kneeling and kowtowing 999 steps to pray for your safety. Gu Yanchen was struck as if by lightning, his mind buzzing. 999. She knelt, step by step, knocking her head on 999 steps, just to pray for a talisman that could protect him for a lifetime. Su Mingyue once loved him so deeply, yet he pushed her further and further away with his own hands. He finally understood. The moment I lost Su Mingyue, I had already lost the most important thing. Gu's mother looked at Gu Yanchen's pale face, patted his shoulder, and said gravely, forget it, if you don't want to get married for your entire life and want to wait for her, we support you. Hearing this, Gu Yanchen fell into silence. Everything in the dream was still terrifyingly clear, and he could even feel the despair of a heart turned to ashes. How many mistakes he had made, how much time he had wasted. Is it too late to wake up now? But it doesn't matter whether it's too late or not. This time, he will never let Su Mingyue go again. But now, he is even more tormented than in his dreams. At least in his dreams, even if he was cold and distant, even if he treated her cruelly, he still had Su Mingyue for nearly 60 years. But now he doesn't even have the right to marry her. Gu Yanchen suddenly clutched his chest and burst into tears. His tears fell onto the blanket, and even taking a deep breath felt difficult, as if his chest was being ripped apart. Yanchen, what's wrong? Gu's mother was greatly alarmed by his sudden outburst and quickly embraced him, asking, is something wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Gu Yanchen just shook his head firmly. He couldn't explain, nor did he want to. His voice was hoarse with pain. Mom, what should I do? I've lost Mingyue. I'll never have her again. He finished speaking and completely broke down emotionally like a child drained of all strength. He buried his face in his mother's embrace, crying so hard he could barely control himself. His mother gently patted his back, just as she had soothed him when he was a child. But in this moment, he was no longer a child. What he had lost was gone for good. He finally admitted, Mom, I think I'm really in love with Su Mingyue. He looked up, his eyes filled with confusion and anguish. Mrs. Gu was visibly taken aback by his words, then let out a soft sigh. Yanchen, do you really think I don't know? It's obvious you've always had feelings for Su Mingyue, but you refuse to admit it to yourself, insisting on acting like you don't care. She looked at him, her expression complex. Her tone held a mix of resignation and heartache. But what I've never understood is, if you like her, why did you have to wait until you'd driven her away before you were willing to admit it? Gu Yanchen's body trembled slightly, his fingertips gripping the blanket tightly, his face pale. Yes, why wouldn't he admit it? Why did he push her away himself? Perhaps, at first, he simply resisted the marriage arranged by his parents. He refused to be the obedient child in his parents' eyes, a puppet with a preordained life path. No matter how wonderful Su Mingyue was, she was ultimately the wife his parents had arranged for him, the woman he was destined to marry from childhood. He yearned to be the master of his own destiny, so he fought desperately against it, struggling to break free, defying his parents' expectations. He became a teacher and embarked on his own independent life. His first student was Qin Nuanyuan. Qin Nuanyuan was completely different from Su Mingyue. She was simple, timid, and always dependent. Unlike Su Mingyue, who openly expressed her love for him, she kept it carefully hidden in her heart. He finally found a sense of control over his own life in her. Only when he poured all his emotions into Qin Nuanyuan did he feel truly alive, rather than a machine living for his parents' expectations. But now, he has finally realized everything about Qin Nuanyuan was an act. Her dependence, her gentleness, her timidity, all were an illusion. Only now did he realize that the one he truly loved from beginning to end was never Qin Nuanyuan. It was Su Mingyue, who dared to love and hate, and who was bold and passionate. He had been running away from his own heart all along, but now, he has nowhere to run. He has figured everything out. Trembling all over, he murmured, Mom, I can't let go. Whether it's 10 years, 20 years, or even 40 years, I will wait for Mingyue to return. I've figured out my whole life. There's no other woman for me but her. Mother Gu was stunned. She met Gu Yanchen's resolute gaze, fell silent for a moment, and then gave a slight, slow nod. If Su Mingyue truly meant that much, then why not make amends? Even if she made him wait 10 years, 20 years, but at least, she's still alive. As long as a person is alive, there's always a chance to make things right. Moreover, he has known Su Mingyue for many years. She used to like him so much. Perhaps she is just heartbroken now. As long as he can show Su Mingyue his determination to change. She will surely come back. Mother Gu merely let out a soft sigh and shook her head. Chen, I've made some inquiries for you. Their project lead made it very clear, if she performs well, it's possible, she may never come back. Gu Yanchen's heart gave a violent lurch. He clenched his teeth and nodded. Then I'll wait. I'll always wait for the day she returns. After realizing his true feelings, Gu Yanchen began his search without hesitation. He used all his connections and tried every possible way to find out Su Mingyue's whereabouts. He even considered investing to improve Su Mingyue's treatment in the project, but soon he discovered the project Su Mingyue was involved in was classified at the highest level. There was simply no way any information could leak out. He then began frantically pouring money into any state-level classified project that might fit the criteria. He kept earning money and kept investing it, clinging to the hope of one day finding a trace of her. Yet, at the same time, someone, no one knew who, let the cat out of the bag. Soon, every aristocrat in the city knew that Su Mingyue would not be coming back. The news that Gu Yanchen was single and had no fiancé quickly spread across major companies. Families from all quarters rushed in, eager to form an alliance with the Gu family through marriage. Everyone was inquiring about Gu Yanchen's marital status. However, Gu Yanchen promptly held a press conference without hesitation before the lenses of the city's media. He declared with unwavering resolve, I will wait for Su Mingyue to return. During this time, I will not accept anyone else's affections. If she does not return, I will not marry. Meanwhile, at a remote research station in Antarctica, a few researchers who were familiar with Su Mingyue excitedly gathered around her, holding up their phones. Mingyue, is this your fiancé? I remember you said you'd marry your fiancé after graduation. This man has the same name as your fiancé, and the fiancé he's looking for even shares your name. Now that you're here, do you think he might be looking for you? Su Mingyue's hand stilled for a moment, her fingers tightening unconsciously around the lab equipment. She quickly regained her composure and offered a faint smile. How could that be? My fiancé and I parted ways long ago. This must just be a coincidence of names. The colleagues chuckled and didn't press the matter further. After all, they were just working together. No one knew the details of each other's personal lives. However, that wasn't the end of it. That evening, Su Mingyue's phone suddenly rang. A former university classmate who is now doing research at another base. As soon as the call connected, the other person lowered their voice and said, Mingyue, you've seen the uproar going on lately, right? Has it affected your research? Su Mingyue frowned and said, it hasn't affected me. The person on the other end sighed and said, actually, Gu Yanchen has been calling me a lot. Although he hasn't directly asked about your whereabouts, he has already donated a significant amount of money to our base. Mingyue, it seems now that he really wants to see you. The person paused, his tone complex. Have you considered applying to return early? After all, weren't you always the most fond of him? Did you come here just to spite him? Su Mingyue clenched her phone, sighed softly, her tone calm yet aloof. I didn't come here for him, no matter how he apologizes, it has nothing to do with me. Besides, I found my own worth here. I don't want to ruin my future over a man again. The person on the other end of the line fell silent for a moment, then sighed. All right, I understand. I'll keep your secret. Su Mingyue hung up the phone, but a vague, inexplicable emotion stirred within her. Of course, she knew Gu Yanchen was looking for her, and she had seen those news reports and videos. She knew he had changed, but so what? In her past life, he had hurt her so deeply. Even on his deathbed, he never felt guilty toward her. Instead, leaving all his inheritance to Qin Nuanyuan, she had once thought that in her past life, at least she would hear a thank you, but what she received was endless coldness and betrayal. She no longer wanted to waste her life on a man. Her future was her own. The whole farce gradually died down. As the project progressed, their research began to yield breakthroughs, and the team started looking forward to the upcoming New Year holiday. That evening, the boss suddenly announced, a corporate sponsor has specially invited everyone to a New Year's Eve dinner to thank you for your hard work. Feel free to relax tonight, but remember to maintain confidentiality. Su Mingyue disliked crowds and had intended to decline, but with her colleagues all egging her on, she was eventually ushered into the private room. However, the moment she stepped inside, her feet froze in place. Gu Yanchen stood there. He wore a black suit, his expression tense, his eyes brimming with intense emotions. At the sight of Su Mingyue, his eyes reddened slightly. Mingyue, Su Mingyue's expression darkened, and she turned to leave, but Gu Yanchen quickly stepped forward and grasped her wrist. Mingyue, why are you avoiding me? Irritated, Su Mingyue shook off his hand and looked at him coldly. Gu Yanchen, what's the meaning of you coming here? Gu Yanchen's eyes welled up, his voice trembling slightly. Mingyue, I've been looking for you for so long. I know what I did was wrong. Su Mingyue cut him off, her tone distant. Mr. Gu, get to the point. There's no need to waste time on meaningless words. Gu Yanchen's face instantly paled. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, Mingyue, I'm truly sorry. These years, I've been having the same dream over and over. In the dream, we get married and have a child, but in the dream, I'm a jerk. I never cherished you, and in the end, we part ways bitterly. The dream feels so real that it makes me believe I truly wronged you, so, after waking up, I searched everywhere for you, hoping to make amends. I only beg you to forgive me. Su Mingyue's expression remained indifferent, unmoved in the slightest. Mr. Gu, she spoke word by word, we've been over for a long time, there's no engagement, no partnership, we're nothing but strangers now, so, there's no talk of forgiveness, and no need for amends. Gu Yanchen's breath hitched in his throat. He stared at her painfully, his voice hoarse. But, those dreams were too real. I always felt like I really owed you. Su Mingyue sighed softly, her gaze calm and almost cold. Gu Yanchen, that wasn't a dream, that was our past life. You did betray me, and it has caused me a lifetime of pain, so this time, I don't want to make the same mistake again. Please, stop bothering me. Gu Yanchen was stunned, his lips moved several times, but no words came out. Su Mingyue looked at him, her expression calm. In my previous life, I served you like a beast of burden for nearly 60 years, but in the end, not only did you not appreciate me, you even left all your inheritance to Qin Nuanyuan, and I was killed by the people Qin Nuanyuan brought with her. Gu Yanchen, having lived a second life, I've finally figured things out. I want to pursue my own life. If it were you, could you forget the person you were in your past life? The air was deathly still. Gu Yanchen's hand slowly relaxed, his face turned as pale as paper, frozen in place, as if all his strength had drained away. He had always believed that dream was just a bizarre illusion, but now, Su Mingyue told him that wasn't a dream, it was something that truly happened in his past life. He truly wronged her in this life. He keeps saying he wants to make amends and forgive, but if it were him, could he forgive himself like that at this moment? He dared not imagine how much pain Su Mingyue endured in her previous life. He fell to his knees, laughing and crying in a state of utter despair, alternating between the two. His world crumbled completely at this moment. In this life, Su Mingyue would never forgive him again. After the supervisor caught wind of their relationship, that New Year's Eve dinner never did happen. Gu Yanchen left in disgrace, and Su Mingyue never looked back. When Su Mingyue saw Gu Yanchen again, a full decade had passed. By then, their research project had achieved a breakthrough success, and they could finally go home. People in the lab were excitedly hugging, celebrating, and filled with laughter, but Su Mingyue only felt an empty void in her heart. She had no family, as her parents were no longer alive, and Gu's parents, probably because of what happened back then. She felt a growing distaste for her. As the plane landed, she dragged her luggage out of the airport, only to spot a familiar figure in the distance. Gu's mother stood there, her eyes red and swollen, gazing at her. Mingyue, you're back. Su Mingyue froze in shock. The next instant, she dropped her luggage, rushed over, and wrapped her arms tightly around Madame Gu. Trembling, Madame Gu gently stroked her back, her voice choked with emotion. Mingyue, Yan Chen wants to see you one last time. Su Mingyue went completely rigid. She asked subconsciously, what do you mean? No one answered. She was taken into the car, and it wasn't until she stepped into the hospital ward that she finally understood everything. On the hospital bed lay a man who was emaciated beyond recognition, barely in his late 30s. His temples were already streaked with gray, and he looked haggard, like a withered leaf in the wind. It was Gu Yanchen. Su Mingyue's heart gave a sharp jolt. How could this be? In his previous life, Gu Yanchen lived to be over 80. If it weren't for that flu, he could have lived even longer. But now, why has he turned out like this? Mother Gu wiped away her tears. Mingyue, after you left, Yanqing almost went mad. He worked himself to the bone, unable to eat or sleep, his body gradually breaking down. Now, there's not much time left. The air seemed to have frozen. Su Mingyue stood by the hospital bed, gazing at this man who was once so arrogant and domineering, now lying on his deathbed. A complex, indescribable emotion welled up inside her. For her entire life, she had utterly despised her, but now, seeing Gu Yanchen's appearance, it didn't feel good for myself. Gu Yanchen opened his eyes, saw her, and revealed a faint smile. Mingyue, you're here. His voice was very soft, very weak, yet carried the longing and pain buried for 10 years. For the past 10 years, I've been having that dream every night. I'm tormented by pain. I finally understand how much I've wronged you. He slowly raised his trembling hand, trying to touch Su Mingyue's face, but it fell weakly in the end. What a pity. I never got to wait for your return, to treat you as you deserve. My time is nearly up. But in this life, all my worldly possessions, I leave them to you. Su Mingyue gazed at him, let out a soft sigh, and reached out to take his hand. Gu Yanchen's fingers trembled then. Two streams of hot tears slid from the corners of his eyes. His voice was choked with sobs. Mingyue, in this lifetime, I beg you, forgive me. Su Mingyue closed her eyes for a moment, and finally said softly, I forgive you. Gu Yanchen's eyes lit up slightly, his voice choked with emotion, carrying the last glimmer of hope. So, in the next life, will you give me a chance? Can we still be together? I want to marry you. Su Mingyue paused for a moment, not answering. The ward fell silent for a few seconds, but Gu Yanchen already understood. He smiled wryly, his gaze a mixture of relief and regret. Mingyue, in our next life, no matter where you are, I will find you. As the words faded, she slowly closed her eyes. The heart monitor let out a long beep, then fell silent. In this life, they were destined to miss each other. After handling everything, Su Mingyue returned to her research position and embraced an even brighter future. She once believed she could truly let go, yet, in the stillness of midnight dreams, she would still hear that familiar voice, whispering over and over by her ear, Mingyue, in our next life, no matter where you are, I will find you. The end. Story 2. To save his illegitimate child suffering from kidney failure, Gu Bianian secretly sent his 5-year-old daughter, without his wife's knowledge, to the operating table to donate a kidney. Upon receiving the news, Chi Huan drove to the hospital like a madman. By the time she arrived at the hospital, the lights in the operating room were already on. Chi Huan's eyes were filled with rage as she desperately pounded on the operating room door. Stop, I'm the child's mother, and I don't agree to her donating a kidney. Gu Bianian stepped forward and held her tightly in his arms, his voice filled with deep guilt. Huan, I'm sorry, but if Xiaoyu's condition continues to worsen, he might not make it. Only Sui donating a kidney can save him. Chi Huan looked at the man she had loved for so many years in disbelief. The face she once found so endearing now seemed so unfamiliar. All he cared about was the safety of his illegitimate child. But had he ever considered that Sui was a premature baby who had been frail and sickly since birth? How could her body possibly withstand the loss of a kidney? The red light in the operating room hung like a sword over Chi Huan's head, her voice trembling. Gu Bianian, that illegitimate child is your child, but isn't Sui your daughter too? I'm begging you, please, call off the surgery. By the end, Chi Huan's tears were falling in heavy drops onto the floor. Gu Bianian kissed away the dampness at the corner of her eye, his heart aching for her, yet the strength in his hands never wavered. Huan, don't worry, it's just one kidney, Sui will be perfectly fine. Chi Huan was utterly disappointed in him, struggling desperately and biting down hard on Gu Bianian's web between thumb and index finger. Even after tasting blood in his mouth, Gu Bianian never let go, firmly holding her in place. After an unknown amount of time, the light in the operating room went out. The doctor emerged from the operating room, carrying a box and hurrying upstairs. A flicker of relief crossed Gu Bianian's face. He instantly released his grip and strode away. Chi Huan stumbled frantically into the operating room, seeing her daughter's pale little face on the operating table. A tidal wave of overwhelming guilt crashed over her. Sui, I'm so sorry, mommy's late, I'm so sorry. Sui opened her eyes weakly, her small hand reaching up with effort to touch Chi Huan's cheek. Mommy, didn't daddy say he was taking me to the amusement park? Why am I in the hospital? Did Sui do something wrong to make him angry? Hearing the confusion in her daughter's voice, Chi Huan felt as if her heart were being torn apart, unable to utter a single sound from her throat. How could she tell her daughter that she had done nothing wrong? That it was just that her father, Gu Bianian, now had room in his heart only for his illegitimate son, with no place left for his daughter. How could a child of only 5 years old possibly bear such a cruel truth? The hurt in Sui's eyes deepened, tears welling up at their corners. But didn't daddy say he loved me and mommy the most, and would never be angry with us? Chi Huan could hold back no longer and burst into loud, heart-wrenching sobs. Once, Gu Bianian's only loves were her and Sui, but not anymore. Gu Bianian was known as the cold-faced king of the business world, while Chi Huan, as his childhood sweetheart and wife, was the only exception to his stern demeanor. At her mere mention of feeling unwell, he immediately cancelled a multi-billion-dollar deal and flew back from abroad overnight just to personally take care of her bedside. After she glanced at a collectible twice, he used all his resources to locate the owner and willingly paid billions over the asking price to acquire it. After she became pregnant, Gu Bianian doted on her even more, indulging her every whim. Some say that wealthy couples inevitably drift apart, sharing a bed but not a dream. Chi Huan firmly believed that she and Gu Bianian would be the exception. Yet, in her 7th month of pregnancy, She witnessed him in bed with a female college student that day. She was so enraged that it affected her pregnancy, and she was rushed to the hospital, where she gave birth prematurely to her daughter. Sway Sway Gubianian knelt by the hospital bed, and the usually proud man gave himself several hard slaps, his face swollen and red as he apologized to her. Juan, I was framed, you have to believe me, I absolutely had no intention of betraying you. Seeing her newborn daughter, Chi Juan's heart softened. Gubianian paid off the college student and sent her away, resuming his role as the devoted husband and father. But just a month ago, Chi Juan stumbled upon Gubianian walking hand in hand with a woman and a little boy. The boy was the spitting image of him, a perfect miniature. The woman shielded the boy behind her, staring back at Chi Juan with defiant determination. Mrs. Gu, Xiao Yu will only ever be my child, Shinjin his child. He will never compete with your daughter for the Gu family's inheritance. A rare look of panic flashed across Gubianian's face as he pulled her into a tight embrace, desperate to explain. Juan, she's the college student from that night 5 years ago, the night I was drugged. It was only then that Chi Juan realized the truth. That fateful night 5 years ago had resulted in Shinjin's pregnancy. She had borne the child alone and raised him by herself. Not long ago, Shinjin had took her child to an interview at Gu Corporation and ran into Gubianian. Although Gubianian had long forgotten the appearance of that female college student, the little boy following her was 6/10 similar to him, and he could recognize at a glance that the child was his. After returning home, Gubianian made a promise to her. Xiao Yu is, after all, related to me by blood. Give me some time, and I will arrange a place for them. Sway Sway will be my only heir, and that will never change. Thinking of his daughter who was so dependent on her father, Chi Juan once again gave in. Not long after the child was diagnosed with kidney failure, Gubianian already felt guilty about Shin Jinhe and his family, and after hearing this news, he used all his connections to find a matching kidney donor. To his surprise, the only match turned out to be Sway Sway. Chi Juan had thought that given Gubianian's deep affection for Sway Sway, he would never allow her to donate a kidney, but reality slapped her hard in the face. Not only did Gubianian propose for Sway Sway to donate a kidney, but now, despite her strong opposition, he had deceived her into getting Sway Sway onto the operating table. Seeing her frail daughter, Chi Juan's heart was filled with nothing but regret. Sway Sway, would you like mommy to take you away? We don't need daddy anymore. Why don't we need daddy? Is he still angry with Sway Sway? Sway Sway's voice grew softer. Mommy, I'll apologize to daddy. Ask him not to be mad at me. Okay, I don't like the hospital. Sway Sway's voice grew fainter, her small hand weakly slipping from Chi Juan's cheek as she closed her eyes. Looking utterly exhausted, Chi Juan's heart raced as she tightly gripped Sway Sway's small hand, her voice trembling. Sway Sway, what's wrong? Please open your eyes, sweetheart. Don't scare mommy like this. Sway Sway remained completely unresponsive. Chi Juan desperately called out for a doctor. A nurse rushed over and gasped upon seeing Sway Sway's pale face. The patient has postoperative infection and needs immediate resuscitation. Chi Juan cried out with tears streaming down her face. Quick, find a doctor. The nurse was in a difficult position. All the doctors have been called away by Mr. Gu, and no one is available to assist. Chi Juan trembles as she pulls out her phone, her face filled with uncontrollable panic. I'm calling him right now. She dialed 18 times in total, but no one answered. Chi Juan still wouldn't give up and dialed the 19th call. The call finally connected. Gubianian, Sway, beep. All the monitors flatlined, setting off the alarms. Chi Juan stood frozen in place, staring blankly at her lifeless daughter on the operating table. Gubianian's voice, brimming with unconcealed joy, came through the phone. Juan, Xiao Yu just came out of surgery. It was a complete success. He's going to be okay. Why all the calls? Is Sway Sway awake and asking for me? I'm on my way. Chi Juan closed her eyes, her voice hoarse. That won't be necessary. Neither Sway Sway nor she would ever need Gubianian again. The nurse gave Chi Juan a sympathetic look, unplugged all the equipment, and left, giving the grieving mother some space. The moment the operating room door closed, Chi Juan's strength seemed to drain away, and she suddenly collapsed to the floor, her eyes filled with lifelessness. When Sway Sway was first born, she was just a tiny bundle, her first mommy, her first time standing up. All the past memories kept flashing through Chi Juan's mind, finally stopping at the image of Sway Sway's pale face lying on the cold operating table. Agony flooded every fiber of her being, yet not a single tear would fall. After what felt like an eternity, Chi Juan slowly rose. She cradled Sway Sway's cold body in her arms, rocking gently as she had done to lull the child to sleep years ago. Sway Sway, mommy's taking you away from here. Her legs felt as heavy as lead, each step an immense struggle. As she reached the operating room door, she bumped into Gubi and Ian, his lips curling into a smile. Huan, Xiaoyu has safely come out of the operating room. I came to check on Sui Sui. Safe. Chi Huan bit her lip hard, her heart aching so much she could barely breathe. His illegitimate son's safety was bought with Sui Sui's life. Sui Sui doesn't need a father who doesn't love her. Gu Banyan's smile froze on his face, and a hint of pain appeared in his expression. Huan, how could I not love Sui Sui? She is my most cherished daughter, my little princess whom I hold dear to my heart. If I could, I would rather endure all her life's pain for her. She only needs to grow up carefree and happy. His words were earnest, and he looked every bit the devoted father. In the next moment, Chi Huan burst out laughing, an overwhelming sense of sorrow filling her chest. But, Gubi and Ian, the greatest pain in Sui Sui's life is what you brought upon her. Love, if you truly loved Sui Sui, how could you have put her on that operating table? Do you have any idea? Right up until her death, she thought she was sent to the hospital because she had done something wrong. She was even apologizing to you. The rest of the words choked in Chi Huan's throat. Impossible to utter. Gubi and Ian looked at Chi Huan's red-rimmed eyes, and a sudden pang shot through his heart as he began to explain in a frantic tone. I promise this is the first and last time. Xiaoyu's body simply can't wait for another kidney match, and after all, they are still siblings. As his gaze fell on Chi Huan's increasingly pale face, Gubi and Ian paused, changing the subject. Is Sui Sui still under anesthesia? Let me take her to the ward. I'll stay with her until she wakes up. Chi Huan's grip on Sui Sui tightened unconsciously, and sorrow enveloped her like a massive spider's web, leaving her gasping for breath. Waking up, he didn't know yet that Sui Sui would never wake up again. Just as Gu Banyan's hands were about to touch Sui Sui, a bodyguard hurried over. Mr. Gu, the young master has woken up. He's crying and asking for you. He says if he can't see you, he'll pull out his four. And even Miss Shen can't calm him down. He just had surgery. How can he be so reckless? Gu Ian scolded, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. He retracted his hand mid-air, looking at Chi Huan with an apologetic gaze. Huan, can you stay with Sui Sui for a bit? I'll calm Xiaoyu down and be right back. Gu Ian. Chi Huan's voice was ice cold. This is your last chance. Once he leaves, she will never have the chance to see Sui Sui again in this lifetime. Gu Ian, however, thought she had forgiven him for what he did today, and he breathed a sigh of relief. After Xiaoyu recovers and leaves, I will definitely spend some quality time with you and Sui Sui. We will be the same as before, still a happy family of three. Chi Huan held Sui Sui, standing still and watching Gu Ian leave with long strides, a sarcastic smile tugging at her lips. The once happy family of three can never return from today onwards. Chi Huan held Sui Sui and went to the mortuary. She watched with her own eyes as Sui Sui transformed from a lively child into a handful of light ashes. Throughout the entire process, she couldn't shed a single tear. Like a walking corpse, she had the boss put the ashes into a small jar, which she then strung into a necklace and hung around her neck. Her Sui Sui would surely prefer to be with her all the time rather than alone underground. After leaving the funeral home, Chi Huan went straight to the law firm. I want to sign that divorce agreement from 4 years ago. The day after Gu Ian slept with the female college student, he personally drafted a divorce agreement and signed his name in front of Chi Huan. He said, Huan, if I betray you again, you sign this agreement, divorce me, and leave me forever. Chi Huan thought she would never have the chance to see that divorce agreement again in her lifetime. She never imagined that, in just 5 short years, this agreement would be placed before her once again. Chi Huan took the agreement and signed her name with deliberate, solemn strokes. After returning to the villa, Chi Huan instinctively walked into Sui Sui's room. The room was in perfect order, exactly as it had been when she left that morning, but there will never be the laughter and joy of the past here again. Her gaze swept over every item in the room inch by inch, finally resting on the doll at the bedside. It was the birthday gift she gave to Sui Sui, equipped with a recording function. The moment she pressed the recording button, a familiar voice came through. Wow, the doll Mom gave me. I'm going to sleep with you every night. Love you, Mom. Each word was like a heavy hammer, pounding against Chi Huan's heart again and again. Finally, the tears that had been suppressed for so long burst forth. She hugged the doll tightly to her chest, curled up in bed, as if she could feel the lingering warmth of Sui Sui. She deeply regretted it. She regretted handing Sui Sui over to Banyan in the morning. She regretted not getting divorced 5 years ago. Even more, she regretted falling in love with Banyan. Chi Huan clutched the small jar in front of her chest tightly. Sui Sui, just wait a little longer. Mommy will take you away soon. Tears slid down the corner of her eye and disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, as Chi Huan descended the stairs, she noticed 2 additional people in the living room. Gu Ian held Shinjin's hand, which had a small cut, and carefully applied iodine to it with focused attention. Shinjinha's eyes were slightly red, but she stubbornly turned her head away, refusing to look at him. Mr. Gu, don't think that being nice to me will make me soften and give you custody of Xiaoyu. He is my son, and only mine. Despite being spoken to coldly, Gu Bianian showed no sign of anger. He gently blew on the wound, carefully wrapped it with gauze, and then met her gaze with a somewhat helpless expression. I won't fight you for Xiaoyu, but he is our child, you can't deny that. All I want now is to make up for the 5 years you and he spent without me. Jihuan's hands, hanging at her sides, clenched into tight fists, her fingernails digging into her palms. Make up for it, what Gu Bianian owes her and her son, how can it be paid with Sue's life? Gu Bianian caught sight of Jihuan out of the corner of his eye. He immediately set down the gauze in his hand, stepped forward to pull her into an embrace, and explained softly, Huan, Jean had just wanted to borrow the kitchen to make some nourishing soup for Xiaoyu. She accidentally cut her hand just now, and I was only helping her treat the wound. Please don't overthink it. What about Sui? Has she woken up? Jihuan's eyelashes fluttered. No, Sui will never wake up again. Gu Bianian was stunned. It was just anesthesia for surgery. So why hasn't Sui woken up the next day? Just as he was about to continue speaking, a notification sound interrupted his thoughts. After reading the message, Gu Bianian frowned. Huan, I have to step out for some company business. After saying that, he patiently reminded Shinjinha, be careful not to get the wound wet. I'll come back to pick you up after the soup is done. And we'll go to the hospital together to see Xiaoyu. Listening to Gu Bianian's gentle voice, Jihuan's heart felt as if it was being gripped by a large hand, leaving her breathless. In the past, Gu Bianian would only show his gentle side to her and Sui. Now, there are also Shinjinha and his son. After Gu Bianian left, only Jihuan and Shinjinha remained in the living room. Shinjinha's expression returned to its usual cool detachment. Mrs. Gu, you can rest assured, although Mr. Gu saved Xiaoyu, I have no intention of letting my son be a bastard child. I will never give up his custody. It's just the two of us here. There's no need to keep up the act. Jihuan's face turned cold as she ruthlessly exposed Shinjinha's true nature. You certainly didn't want him to be a bastard. What you wanted, it seems, was for him to be the legitimate heir of the Gu family. 5 years ago, in addition to giving Shinjinha a large sum of money as hush money and compensation, Gu Bianian specifically had his bodyguard buy medicine and instructed her to take it. But not only did Shinjinha get pregnant, she also gave birth to the child. 5 years later, she returned to the Gu Corporation to apply for a job, and then accidentally let Gu Bianian discover they had a child together. Having grown up in a wealthy family, Jihuan understood Shinjinha's true intentions all too well. Shinjinha's expression froze for a moment, but the next second, she shot to her feet, looking utterly insulted. Mrs. Gu, please don't look at me through the filthy lens of you rich people. I just couldn't bear to give up a little life. And Mr. Gu, recognizing Xiaoyu was beyond my expectations, Jihuan coldly stared at Shinjinha, who had a resolute expression, and said nothing more as she turned and went upstairs. Whatever Shinjinha's true intentions are, it no longer concerns her. If she wants the title of Mrs. Gu, she can take it. Jihuan returned to Sui's bedroom and started packing her luggage. Every item here still carried Sui's presence, and she was determined to take them all. Her gaze fell on the photo album Sui had left on the desk, and she approached to open it. Inside were photos of their family of 3 under Mount Fuji. Gu Bianian held Sui in one arm and held her hand with the other, while on the beach, she and Sui laughed and chased each other, and Gu Bianian watched them with loving eyes from behind. In every photo, the 3 of them had identical smiles on their faces, and the sense of happiness seemed to overflow from the pictures. But now, such happy times can never be relived. Jihuan took out all the photos, tore off Gu Bianian's image one by one, and threw them into the trash, leaving only her and Sui. Halfway through tidying up, a pungent odor assaulted her nostrils. Jihuan frowned. The moment she opened the door, the smell grew even stronger. She had only taken a few steps when a sudden wave of dizziness hit her, making her stagger. She barely managed to steady herself by leaning against the wall. In that moment, the fog in Jihuan's mind cleared a little. It's a gas leak. Jihuan soaked a towel to cover her mouth and nose, forcing herself to go downstairs. As soon as she reached the living room, she saw Shinjinha passed out on the sofa. The dizziness in her head grew overwhelming, and Jihuan could no longer hold on. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the floor. Jihuan tried to reach for her phone to call for help, but her eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Just as she was about to lose consciousness, the sound of the door opening came from the entrance. Jihuan bit down hard on the tip of her tongue, fighting to stay conscious as she reached out toward Gu Bianian. Gu Bianian, help me, Jean. Gu Bianian rushed to Shinjinha without hesitation, sweeping her up in his arms. Hold on, I'm taking you to the hospital right now. His steps were hurried, completely oblivious to Chi Huan's desperate pleas for help. From a short distance away, Chi Huan lay on the cold floor, watching the man who had once promised to protect her for a lifetime walk away with another woman in his arms, before slowly closing her eyes. When Chi Huan awoke, her mind was still a foggy haze. Huan, you're finally awake. Seeing Chi Huan open her eyes, Gu Bianian immediately took her hand and pressed a kiss to it. Do you know how close my heart came to stopping when I saw you collapse? I'm just glad you woke up. Known in the business world as the Ice King, Bane Yengu's voice trembled slightly now, and his palms were covered in a fine layer of sweat. Anyone who saw this would surely marvel at his deep affection, but Chi Huan merely turned her head away, avoiding his gaze. She would never forget that in her moment of near death, Gu Banyan's entire focus was on Shinjinha's safety, completely oblivious to her collapsing on the cold floor. Gu Banyan's heart suddenly raced. He had never seen Chi Huan so indifferent before. Huan, I just didn't see that you had also fainted, so I saved Jinha first. The place where she collapsed was less than a meter away from Shinjinha. Was it that he was so preoccupied with Shinjinha's unconscious state that he couldn't spare a thought for anyone else, or did he genuinely not see her at all? Chi Huan withdrew her hand and closed her eyes wearily. Her body, still weak from just waking up, had no energy left to pursue the truth. Seeing her remain silent, Gu Bianian hesitated before speaking. Jinha hasn't fully recovered yet. And Xiaoyu just had surgery and is still bedridden. He didn't finish his sentence, but after all these years of living together, how could Chi Huan not understand what he meant? How pathetic. Gu Banyan's body was here, but his heart had long since flown to Shinjinha and her son. Go ahead, anyway, she doesn't care anymore. Gu Bianian stared at Chi Huan's calm face for a long time, only relaxing when he noticed she had kept her eyes closed the entire time. I'll be back soon, get some rest. His soon turned out to be a full week without a trace of him. On the day Chi Huan was discharged from the hospital, she went to handle the discharge procedures alone. Passing by a ward, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. Xiaoyu, you must do your best to cling to Dad. Okay, our future depends on you. But Mom, he's not my dad. Chi Huan's heart clenched. What did that mean? Was the child saying Gu Bianian wasn't his father? Holding her breath, she quietly turned on her phone's voice recorder. Shinjin had changed his usual aloof demeanor in front of others and scolded Shinyu with a sense of frustration, as if he were a piece of unrefined iron. So what? As long as Gu Bianian believes you're his son, you are his biological child. Do you really want to go back to those days when you couldn't even eat or dress properly? Let me tell you, your mom doesn't want to live a hard life again. A nurse passed by Chi Huan and asked curiously, Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you with something? Noticing the conversation inside the room had stopped, Chi Huan shook her head and quickly put away her phone before leaving. After completing the discharge procedures, Chi Huan prepared to go home. Just as she reached the doorway of the hospital room, two bodyguards stopped her. Madam, Mr. Gu needs to see you. Chi Huan frowned. For the past 7 days, Gu Bianian has been nowhere to be found. What could he want with her today? She took out her phone to send him a message, but the bodyguard snatched it away. Mr. Gu has given strict instructions. You must come immediately. You'll understand why once you're there. One on each side. They practically dragged her away by force. It wasn't until she saw the familiar hospital room door that Chi Huan realized they had brought her to the room shared by Shinjinha and her child. The moment she stepped inside, crack, Shinjinha slapped Chi Huan hard across the face. Gu Bianian stood beside Shinjinha, his gaze cold as he watched everything unfold. Shinjinha's eyes were red, her voice shrill. Mrs. Gu, neither Xiaoyu nor I have any interest in the Gu family. All I want is for him to grow up safe and healthy. Why won't you just leave him alone? Slender fingernails raked across Chi Huan's cheek, leaving a deep, bloody gash. Shinjinha's words left Chi Huan utterly bewildered. What are you talking about? I don't know. Let me go. You're still lying. Shinjinha pointed at the pale-faced Shinyu on the hospital bed, tears falling. Xiaoyu is only 4 years old, and he just had a kidney transplant. How could you be so cruel to him? You're a mother too. Shinjinha had always maintained a strong, unyielding front in front of Gu Bianian. This was the first time she had shown a vulnerable side. His heart aching for her, he pulled her into his embrace and gently wiped the moisture from the corner of her eye. Let me handle this. I will give you and Xiaoyu a proper explanation. With that, he turned his gaze to Chi Huan. The eyes that were once brimming with tenderness now held only a bone-chilling coldness and disappointment, his voice thick with barely suppressed rage. Huan, I promised you I would take care of them, the mother and child. I swore they wouldn't affect you or Sui Sui, so why couldn't you find it in your heart to tolerate a 4-year-old boy? You actually told Sui to push Xiaoyu into the pond. If Jinhe hadn't arrived in time, Xiaoyu would have drowned. Jihuan stared in disbelief at Xinyu lying on the hospital bed, his eyes tightly shut. Did you tell Sui to push him into the pond? How could that be? I didn't, Jihuan struggled to explain. Sui already. I saw it with my own eyes. Shen Jinhe interrupted her with a sob in her voice. Do you think I would joke about my son's life? As soon as the words were spoken, Xinyu's weak voice rang out. Sis, I didn't want to take Dad from you. Please, don't push me. Dad, save me. The tearful tremor in Xinyu's voice instantly ignited Gu Banyan's fury. Sui is too young for such malicious thoughts. Someone must have put her up to it. Gu Banyan's icy gaze fell upon Jihuan. Who else could it be but you? The cruel words pierced her heart like a sharp blade. Malicious, and with ulterior motives. After more than 20 years by his side, Gu Banyan didn't trust her character in the slightest. She was a mother herself. How could she ever harm a child? A bead of blood trailed down her cheek and dripped onto the floor, yet Jihuan stubbornly met Gu Banyan's gaze. I told you, it wasn't me. The disappointment in Gu Banyan's eyes deepened. Huan, how did you become so cruel? I hardly recognize you anymore. Jihuan's lips twitched, and an endless sense of irony spread from the depths of her heart throughout her body. Had she changed, or had his heart, once devoted solely to her, now made room for someone else? The air in the hospital room gradually thickened. A bodyguard pushed the door open and whispered a few words into Gu Banyan's ear. Gu Banyan frowned. Huan, why isn't Sui in her room? Before Jihuan could speak, Shen Jinhe clenched his fists, tears welling up in his eyes. Mrs. Gu, even if you instigated your daughter to push Xiaoyu, she did indeed push him. Shouldn't she apologize to Xiaoyu? You just transferred her to another hospital without a word. Gu Banyan's gaze at Jihuan grew even colder. Since you sent Sui away, you can take her place and apologize to Xiaoyu. Even with a painful heart, Jihuan met his gaze without flinching. Why should I apologize for something I didn't do? Gu Banyan stared at her bleeding cheek for a long time, a mix of heartache, anger, disappointment, complex emotions flashing in his eyes, until he finally spoke coldly. Huan, I must get justice for Xiaoyu. He's my son, and I won't let him be harmed. Throw her into the pool. Jihuan looked at Gu Banyan, who was fiercely protecting Shen Jinhe in his arms with a frosty expression, and suddenly smiled. Gu Banyan, you will regret this. For a child that wasn't even his own, he removed Sui's kidney, leading to her infection and death. For a woman who had schemed relentlessly, he personally ordered the punishment of his childhood sweetheart and wife. Gu Banyan turned his head away, steeling himself not to look into Jihuan's lifeless eyes, and urged in a deep voice, why aren't you taking Madam to the pool right now? Jihuan was dragged to the edge of the pool by the bodyguards. Plop, the icy pool water surged over Jihuan's body, rushing relentlessly into her nostrils and mouth. A suffocating sensation gradually overwhelmed Jihuan. In her dazed state, she suddenly remembered a time back in school when someone had merely pointed at her and uttered a threat. Gu Banyan had immediately broken the person's finger on the spot, then forced them to slap their own face while apologizing to her. He shielded her behind him. If anyone dares to lay a finger on Huan, I will make them pay. Now, for Shen Jinhe and his son, he personally ordered her to be thrown into the pool. It was he who made the promise. It was he who broke the oath. Jihuan did not struggle, allowing herself to sink deeper. Gu Banyan, I truly regret ever falling in love with you. When Jihuan woke again, Gu Banyan was gripping her hand tightly, dark circles shadowing his eyes. Huan, why were you lying so still in the pool? Do you have any idea how terrified I was that you were really drowning? Jihuan withdrew her hand, her tone flat and detached. Isn't this exactly what you wanted to see? Gu Banyan's body stiffened, and the anguish on his face deepened. I just wanted to give Jinhe and Xiaoyu an explanation. I never meant for anything to happen to you, but I never imagined you would. All his explanations felt so feeble and inadequate. In the end, Gu Banyan just held her tightly, apologizing over and over. I'm sorry, Huan. I won't let you face even the slightest danger again. Jihuan closed her eyes and said nothing more for the next few days. Perhaps out of guilt, Gu Banyan stayed by her side almost constantly. He took care of her in every detail, warming her fluids, feeding her, wiping her face every morning and evening. Gu Banyan would leave for exactly 1 hour. Jihuan knew perfectly well that he was simply going to the other ward to keep Shen Jinhe and her child company. After Gu Banyan returned from yet another one of his departures, Jihuan looked at the fine beads of sweat on his forehead and spoke softly. Gu Banyan, are you tired? Isn't it exhausting to walk the tightrope between her and Shen Jinhe's family? After being hospitalized again, Jihuan remained silent. this being the first time she took the initiative to speak to Gu Bianian. Gu Bianian thought her anger had subsided significantly, and he gently stroked her cheek. Huan, I wouldn't feel tired doing anything for you, rest assured. I've already arranged places for Jinhe and Xiaoyu. After they leave, we'll bring Sui back, and the three of us will continue living as we used to. Chi Huan lowered her eyes, hiding the lifelessness in her gaze. Sui is already gone, those days of the past can never return. Gu Bianian paused and continued speaking. I will send Xiaoyu abroad to study, Jinhe will accompany him, and they will never appear in front of you again. However, he stopped, glanced at Chi Huan's expression, and seeing no reaction, he continued, I have decided to change Xiaoyu's surname to Gu, too. Have him added to the family genealogy and acknowledge his ancestral roots. Jinhe has already agreed, as if afraid she might get angry. Gu Bianian quickly added an explanation. Don't worry, Xiaoyu won't affect Sui's inheritance rights. I'll only send them a monthly allowance for living expenses and tuition, and I'll fly abroad to visit them from time to time. After all, he is my own child. I simply can't bring myself to cut all ties with him and his mother. Chi Huan lowered her head, hiding the scorn in her eyes. How is that any different from the three of them forming a new family abroad? She didn't care anymore. She nodded calmly. Gu Bianian's unspoken explanation stuck in his throat, and a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. He hadn't expected Chi Huan to agree so calmly. For a moment, he couldn't quite believe it. Huan, you don't object. Chi Huan spoke calmly. I don't object. After all, she was leaving soon. How Gu Bianian chose to arrange things for Jinhe and her son was his own affair. Gu Bianian studied her face for a long moment, only relaxing when he was certain there was no trace of anger in her expression. Huan, I plan to hold a name-changing ceremony for Xiaoyu to formally acknowledge his status to the outside world. I hope you can attend the ceremony. You are, after all, Mrs. Gu. The event would lack legitimacy without your presence. Seeing his nervous look, Chi Huan suddenly smiled. All right. Gu Bianian's worries melted away, and he planted a tender kiss on her forehead, his eyes full of affection. Huan, thank you for understanding. Over the next few days, Gu Bianian began preparing for the renaming ceremony and didn't visit the hospital again. On the day she was discharged, he only sent a driver to pick her up. After getting into the car, Chi Huan received a call from Gu Bianian, his voice still as gentle as ever. Huan, remember to prepare a gift for Xiaoyu, so that outsiders will believe you, as Mrs. Gu genuinely accept him as part of the Gu family. Chi Huan listened to his thoughtful suggestion and let out a soft chuckle. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. She would prepare a gift that no one would ever forget. After getting in the car, instead of heading straight to the banquet hall, Chi Huan instructed the driver to change course for the Civil Affairs Bureau. Today marked the final day of the 30-day cooling-off period for the divorce. Once the official seal was stamped, Chi Huan received her divorce certificate. Over 2 decades of shared affection came to an end today. She fetched a craft paper bag and placed 3 items inside it. The first is the annual death notification. The second is the USB drive containing the recordings of Jinhe and his mother. The third is her divorce certificate with Gu Bianian. She wants Gu Bianian to know that he was utterly wrong. After instructing the driver to personally hand the paper bag to Gu Bianian, Chi Huan took a taxi home, grabbed her already packed suitcase, and headed straight to the airport. As the plane took off, Chi Huan thought she saw Gu Bianian, who had once deeply loved her, standing in front of her, smiling and waving. Huan, well done, take Sui and leave him, leave the me whose love for you is no longer pure. Chi Huan clutched the necklace around her chest and revealed her first genuine smile in days. Gu Bianian, from this day forward, I will be gone from your world forever. The banquet hall, the who's who of the capital were invited today to attend the renaming ceremony for the young master of the Gu family, and they were currently engaged in lively discussion. I heard Mrs. Gu only gave birth to a daughter. When did she have a son? Well, for all we know, Mr. and Mrs. Gu might have secretly had a second child. They'd just done a great job keeping it under wraps and out of the public eye. You've got it all wrong, retorted someone with inside knowledge, their tone dripping with disdain. Bystanders, curious about the identity of this suddenly appeared young master of the Gu family, crowded around to ask questions. Who is that? Don't tell me it's. The man nodded. Yes, it's the general manager Gu's illegitimate child, already 4 years old. As soon as this was said, a commotion erupted among the crowd. Goodness, isn't general manager Gu devoted only to Mrs. Gu? How could he have an illegitimate child? Yeah, I used to envy their childhood sweetheart romance. Who would have thought it would come to this? Well, men, especially someone like Mr. Gu, who's young, handsome, and loaded, having a woman on the side isn't exactly shocking. Since Mr. Gu could throw a name-changing banquet for his illegitimate son, Mrs. Gu must have given her consent. Looks like they'd joined the ranks of those wealthy couples living separate lives under one roof. Gu Bianian was completely unaware of the guests' gossip. He was in the changing room, crouching down to adjust Xinyu's bow tie. Seeing the spirited little boy in front of him, Gu Bianian rubbed his head and carefully instructed him, Xiaoyu, from today on you'll be surnamed Gu. Do you understand? You'll take your father's surname and be called Guyu from now on. Xinyu nodded, then asked with a somewhat puzzled expression, Dad, does that mean Mom and I will be living with you from now on? As the words left his lips, Gu Banyan's movements paused for a moment. Xiaoyu was his own son, and of course, he wanted to be by their side all the time, but he couldn't betray Huan and Sui Sui, so he had to steal himself and send them abroad. Shinjin had glanced at Gu Banyan's expression, crouched down, gently caressed Xinyu's cheek, and softly consoled him, Xiaoyu, Daddy still needs to stay with sister and auntie. As long as you behave, Daddy will come to see you. Hearing this, Gu Bianian looked at this understanding woman with a complex expression, and his guilt deepened further. That fateful night, Shinjinha was innocent. It was he who caused her to suffer unjustly. It wasn't until he reunited with Shinjinha that he learned she had become pregnant from that one time and decided to have his child on her own. The money he gave her was all taken by her gambling parents. She worked odd jobs constantly while heavily pregnant to make enough money to safely give birth. After Xiaoyu was born, her life became even harder, and she had to work 4 jobs a day just to barely raise her child. The moment Gu Bianian learned of their past, a tidal wave of guilt and remorse washed over him. He remembered how, when Chihuan was pregnant, he had spoiled her rotten, having the world's freshest vegetables and meats flown directly to their villa. After Sui Sui was born, he cherished her as the apple of his eye, doting on her so much that he'd call for a doctor's checkup if she even lost her appetite. He never imagined that, in a corner of the world unknown to him, his other child and that child's mother were living such a difficult life. Back then, he secretly made up his mind that no matter whether Jinhe and Xiaoyu were willing to accept him or not, he would ensure that they would live a life of comfort and security for the rest of their days. Originally, he was worried that Shinjinha would cause a scene in front of Huan for the sake of the child, making it difficult for him to handle the situation. However, she had always been very restrained, merely wanting Xiaoyu to feel the fatherly love he had been missing, and never overstepped her boundaries, which made him even more eager to make amends. Gu Bianian made a promise, Jinhe, rest assured, in my heart, both you and Xiaoyu are important. I will take responsibility for you both. Shinjinha's eyelashes fluttered, her eyes slightly reddening at the rims, yet, she forced a determined smile. Mr. Gu, you only need to fulfill your duties as Xiaoyu's biological father. I wouldn't want Mrs. Gu to get angry and divorce you over this. Seeing the faint glimmer of tears in her eyes, a rare pang of pain shot through Gu Banyan's heart, a heart that had grown cold and hard toward everyone except Chihuan. He avoided her gaze and his voice softened. Huan understands me. You don't need to worry. After all, Huan loves him so much. How could she possibly divorce him? Moreover, even if she really proposed a divorce, he would never sign the divorce papers. Gu Bianian spoke with conviction, unaware of the flash of bitter envy in Shinjinha's eyes as he turned his head away. Quickly, she composed herself, her expression softening back into one of understanding and empathy. That's a relief. I would feel terrible if Xiaoyu and I were to cause any trouble for your happy family. Besides, after what happened to Xiaoyu in the water the other day, I really couldn't bear to go through something like that a second time. By the end, Shinjinha's voice trembled slightly, her face reflecting lingering fear. Gu Bianian instinctively pulled her into his arms to comfort her. I promise, this won't happen again. After today, Xiaoyu will be the rightful young master of the Gu family, and no one will dare to harm him. Shinjinha barely curved her lips, deliberately hesitating before speaking. But, what if Mrs. Gu is only pretending to accept Xiaoyu for now? He truly felt guilty towards Shinjinha and Xiaoyu. In fact, he had to admit that deep down, apart from Chihuan, Shinjinha was the second woman who had ever truly captured his regard. Yet, Chihuan was his childhood sweetheart and wife. Her place in his heart was irreplaceable. Even though she had once incited Sui Sui to harm Xiaoyu, she had already paid the price for it. The only solution he could think of to have it both ways was to send Shinjinha and Xiaoyu abroad to prevent them from meeting. In the future, he, Chihuan, and Sui Sui would still be a happy family of 3. He would also make time each month to fly abroad to visit Shinjinha and Xiaoyu, making up for them as a mother and son. Gu Bianian was silent for a moment and did not answer directly. You and Xiaoyu won't be seeing Huan when you're abroad. He looked down at his phone after saying that. As the renaming ceremony was about to begin, I'll head to the banquet hall first. I'll bring Xiaoyu over after getting him changed. Only after Gu Banyan's figure completely disappeared did Shin Jinha remove the mask from her face. She crouched down, gripping Shin Yu's shoulders tightly, her nails digging deep into his flesh. Xiao Yu, remember what mom told you, when you see Qi Huan, start crying and shout out loud in front of everyone how she instigated her daughter to push you into the water. A sharp pain shot through his arm, and Shin Yu's eyes reddened, but he dared not cry. Mom, you're hurting me. Shin Jinha, however, seemed not to hear, his eyes fixed intently on Shin Yu, his voice tinged with urgency. Quickly tell mom, do you remember? Shin Yu lowered his head and pouted. I remember. Shin Jinha finally felt satisfied, her face breaking into a smile again as she gently helped him put on his little suit. This is my good son, our future depends on today. Gu Bianian stepped into the banquet hall, beginning his search for Qi Huan. He had sent the driver to pick her up from the hospital a full hour ago. By all accounts, she should have arrived by now, yet, even after scanning the crowd 3 times over, he still couldn't spot that familiar figure. Frowning, he took out his phone to send a message to Qi Huan. Huan, are you almost here? 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes passed. And the chat box remained silent. Gu Bianian scrolled up the chat history and found that Qi Huan hadn't sent him a single message since her hospitalization. In the past, Qi Huan would take a photo and share it with him whenever she saw a heart-shaped cloud in the sky. A sense of unease crept over Gu Bianian. He immediately dialed the familiar number, but all he heard on the other end was a cold, mechanical tone. Sorry, the number you have dialed is temporarily unavailable. Just as he was about to call the driver, Shin Jinha entered the banquet hall. Holding Xiao Yu's hand, the noisy crowd instantly fell silent, all eyes focusing on the 2 main characters of today's banquet. Gu Bianian had no choice but to set his phone aside and step forward to greet Shin Jinha and her son. He forcefully suppressed the unease churning within him. Perhaps Huan just hadn't fully come to terms with the idea of acknowledging Xiao Yu, and had a last-minute change of heart about attending the name-changing ceremony. Once the ceremony was over, he would head straight home to comfort her properly. After bringing Sui back from the hospital, they planned a family vacation to an island. It had been a long time since they had enjoyed a warm family moment, ever since Shin Jinha and his mother appeared. Thinking of this, Gu Bianian felt much calmer, and a smile appeared on his face. He and Shin Jinha, one on each side, held Xiao Yu's hands and walked to the center of the banquet hall. Standing in front of the microphone, he picked up Xiao Yu and cleared his throat. This is my biological son, Gu Banyan's own flesh and blood. His name is Gu Yu. Starting today, his name will be formally entered into the Gu family registry. Mr. Gu, wait, the driver, panting heavily as he ran up, interrupted Gu Banyan. He handed him a paper bag. This is a gift from Mrs. Gu. She insisted I make sure you open it in front of all the guests. The guests below the stage exchanged glances with one another. So Mrs. Gu is that magnanimous? I don't think so. If one were truly magnanimous, why wouldn't they even show their face? A familiar sense of unease swept over me, more intense than the last time. Gu Bianian lowered his voice. Where is madam? Why are there only things here? But no one, the driver explained with a troubled face. I don't know where madam went, only that you'll understand once you open the paper bag. Gu Bianian didn't care about anything else, put down the little Yu in his arms, and immediately wanted to open the paper bag. Shin Jinha, who had been silent all along, felt a sudden twitch in his brow, a vague sense of unease creeping in. He instinctively wanted to stop Gu Banyan's actions. Mr. Gu, why don't we first add Xiao Yu's name to the family? However, Gu Bianian thought of the persistently silent chat window, and his unease intensified. His mind was entirely occupied by Qi Huan, and he couldn't hear anything else. He tore open the envelope with a quick motion, and a thin sheet of paper immediately caught his eye. 5 large characters were written on it. Death notice. Boom. Gu Banyan's head buzzed with a roar. He could scarcely believe what he was seeing. A death notice. Whose death notice did Huan bring? A figure began to take vague shape in his mind, but in the very next instant, he forcibly banished that image. No, it can't be. How could Sui have passed away when she was clearly transferred to another hospital by Huan? Trembling, he slowly pulled out the death notification. The name of Sui was clearly listed on the deceased list. Disbelievingly, he rubbed hard at the words, hoping to see another name, but there was no change. When he saw the cause of death, he staggered back a few steps. Postoperative infection led to death, and it happened on the very day of the kidney donation surgery. These words were like a heavy hammer, brutally crushing Gu Banyan's heart. Sui actually died from infection after the surgery. What was he doing at that time? He had diverted all the doctors to Xiao Yu's operating room. That means, when Sui developed a post-operative infection, There were simply no doctors available to save her. He is the one who killed his own daughter with his own hands. The death notice slipped from Gubanian's hand and fell to the ground. Unable to support himself any longer, he collapsed to his knees with a thud. Shinjinha stood by, completely unaware of why Gubanian had become so utterly devastated in just a minute. It wasn't until she saw the death notice on the ground that she understood the reason. Gubanian's daughter was dead, which meant her son, Xiaoyu, would become the sole heir of the Gu family. Her eyes sparkled with immense joy, but she fought to suppress the smile tugging at her lips, forcing a sorrowful expression as she offered consolation. Mr. Gu, it's truly tragic that your daughter passed away from an infection after donating a kidney to save Xiaoyu, but what's done is done. At least you still have your son, Xiaoyu. Shinjinha was utterly consumed by her secret delight over Gubanian's daughter's death, completely forgetting that just days ago, she had accused Suisui of pushing Xiaoyu into the water. Gubanian, however, remembered it all too clearly. How could Suisui, who had already passed away, possibly push Xiaoyu into the water? This is nothing but Shinjinha's deliberate slander. What's laughable is that he actually believed her words, allowed her to slap Qi Huan. Not only refused to listen to her explanation but also had someone throw her into the water. He couldn't imagine how heartbroken Qi Huan must have been at that moment. Gubanian violently shook off Shinjinha's hand, his entire body radiating an icy aura as he stood up and looked down at her. I remember you said it was Huan who instigated Suisui to push Xiaoyu into the water. Shinjinha fell heavily to the ground, her palm scraping and bleeding. Shinyu had no idea what was happening and, originally scared, stood to the side, too afraid to approach. Seeing Shinjinha hurt, she immediately rushed over with hurried footsteps, her voice choked with tears. Mom, are you okay? Shinjinha couldn't spare a thought for Shinyu. Her mind was in complete turmoil after her lie was exposed, but the next instant, she remembered that Gubanian now only had Shinyu as his child. For his sake, he would never lay a hand on her, the boy's biological mother. At this thought, Shinjinha felt much calmer and wanted to take Gubanian's hand to apologize. Mr. Gu, I was just too afraid that Mrs. Gu would harm Xiaoyu, that's why. Gubanian turned his body, avoiding her touch. Before Shinjinha could pull back her hand, she instinctively reached forward and tore the paper bag in Gubanian's hand. Thunk. A USB drive and a red divorce certificate suddenly fell to the ground. Divorce certificate. Gubanian's heart plummeted, and an unprecedented panic enveloped his entire being. Trembling, he picked up the divorce certificate, hoping against hope as he opened it. When he saw the name on it, the usually stoic man's eyes turned red. How could it be? How could Huan divorce me? Gubanian staggered back in disbelief, almost losing his balance. This must be fake. I never signed any divorce agreement. Go investigate. Who dares to forge my divorce certificate with Huan? The assistant stood still for a long time without moving, looking troubled as he spoke. Mr. Gu, you've forgotten, 5 years ago, after your wife gave birth prematurely to your daughter, you drafted a divorce agreement yourself to reassure her, and even signed it. Memories from 5 years ago gradually came back to mind. It was only now that Gubanian remembered. Back then, after being set up and spending a night with Shinjinha, he had signed a divorce agreement voluntarily to gain Qi Huan's forgiveness, promising that if he betrayed her again, she would sign the agreement and leave his world. Back then, he had sworn solemnly that he would never do anything to hurt Qi Huan again. 5 years had passed, and he had long forgotten about this divorce agreement and the promises he made back then. Who would have thought that his words would come true after all? Shinjinha was already overjoyed watching this scene unfold. Qi Huan and Gubanian are actually divorced. Given that Shinyu is now his only son, she, as the biological mother, would naturally be the best candidate for the position of Mrs. Gu. She was so overjoyed that it clouded her judgment, making her forget to conceal her ambition. Mr. Gu, I know you're heartbroken right now, but since you and Miss Qi are already divorced, it's time to move on. Xiaoyu has never known a father's love. Why don't we become a real family from now on? Gubanian stared at that beaming face, his hands clenched tightly into fists at his sides. He must have been blind before to ever think that Shinjinha was a woman of aloof and stubborn character. Huan's divorce from him was just a moment of anger. As long as he sincerely apologizes and repents, they can have another child and be a happy family of 3 again. As for Shinjinha, besides being Xiaoyu's biological mother, she will have no further relationship with him. Shinjinha, Xiaoyu is indeed my child, and I will fulfill my duties as a father. However, before he could finish, his assistant hesitantly handed him a voice recorder with the USB drive that had fallen out of the paper bag plugged into it. Mr. Gu, this was also given to you by Your wife, you, should listen to it. Two familiar voices rang out after pressing the play button. So you must do your best to cling to BNE and Goo. Understand, our future depends on you. But mom, he's not my real dad. Why do I have to call him dad? The voices echoed through every corner of the banquet hall via the microphone. The crowd instantly erupted. Goodness, that boy isn't Goo's biological child. So Goo not only caused the death of his own daughter for a child who had nothing to do with him, but also forced his wife to divorce him. This woman is really bold, playing Goo around like a fool. Gu Banyan's face instantly darkened, his eyes churning with fury, his tone icy. Shinjinha, how dare you? Shinjinha never imagined that her conversation with Shinyu would be overheard and recorded by Chi Huan. She panicked completely, her usual aloof composure gone, and frantically grabbed Gu Banyan's hand to explain, Mr. Gu, Xiaoyu is your child, he's just young and hasn't fully accepted the idea of having another father yet, which is why he said that. She nudged Shinyu's back, trying to make him cry to soften the man's heart, but Shinyu was too young, and under Gu Banyan's cold gaze, he couldn't utter a single word. Gu Banyan spoke coldly, giving instructions to his assistant, get an expedited paternity test done, you personally oversee the entire process. The assistant quickly left after pulling out 2 strands of hair, and all the guests were also asked to leave. What was once a bustling banquet hall was now eerily silent. Shinjinha trembled, still desperately pleading, Mr. Gu, you can't take a child's word as gospel, they have a tendency to say all sorts of things. Besides, we already did a paternity test when we reunited, didn't we? Are you suggesting I tampered with the results? Gu Bianian remained unmoved, his fingers tracing the edge of the bright red divorce certificate as a wave of endless regret washed over him. If Shinyu really wasn't his child, then what the hell had he been doing all this time? He was completely manipulated by a scheming woman, a deception that led to his own daughter's death and drove Huan to such utter despair that she signed the divorce papers. The results of the expedited paternity test came back quickly. The assistant hurriedly handed the report to Gu Bianian. Gu Bianian stared fixedly at the damning black and white words on the report, his knuckles turning white as he clenched the paper. The results confirm that Gu Bianian is biologically unrelated to Shinyu. Chi Huan's face, as still and placid as stagnant water, suddenly surfaced in Gu Banyan's mind. Her pale lips parted, uttering the words, you'll regret this. A coppery, metallic taste surged violently into Gu Banyan's throat. He could hold on no longer and closed his eyes in despair. The plane has landed safely in Hong Kong. Just as Chi Huan stepped out of the airport with her suitcase, she spotted her parents and brother, who had been waiting for her. Her brother, Qian, was the first to see her. He rushed over excitedly and wrapped her in a big hug. You finally decided to come visit me and our parents in Hong Kong. The Qi family had gradually shifted their business focus to Hong Kong 4 years ago, but by then, Qi Huan had already married Gu Bianian and given birth to Sui Sui. She could only reluctantly watch as her parents and brother moved to Hong Kong, as Qi Huan looked at her parents' tearful eyes and her brother's deeply concerned gaze. All the grievances and the pain of her daughter's death that had accumulated over the past month surged up, and she broke down in tears the moment she spoke. Dad, Mom, brother, I regret it. Unexpected tears caused a drastic change in expression for Father Qi, Mother Qi, and Qi Yan. Mother Qi quickly embraced Qi Huan, her eyes filled with heartache as she wiped away her tears. Huan, what happened? Qi Yan was the first to react, his voice lowering as he inquired. Tell me, did Gu Bianian bully you? Qi Huan kept crying, unable to speak a complete sentence. Before boarding the plane, she was worried that her parents, being older, would be overwhelmed with anger upon hearing about her situation over the phone, so she didn't tell them about Gu Bianian bringing back his illegitimate child and the child's mother, or about Sui Sui's death. She only said she was coming to Hong Kong. Seeing this, Qi's father had no choice but to first have Qi's mother and Qi Yan take Qi Huan to the car, and they would discuss everything in detail once they got home. Qi Huan's emotions gradually calmed down after arriving home. The 3 of them surrounded her, their worry and concern almost spilling over, yet they dared not ask anything. Qi Huan picked up a glass of water, took a sip, and suppressed the lingering sorrow in her chest before speaking softly. I divorced Gu Bianian. He has a child out of wedlock. What? Qi Yan shot up from his seat, his eyes blazing with fury. This guy once swore to me with a deadly oath that he would always treat you well. How dare he cheat on you, and even have a love child? A wave of sharp pain surged through Qi Huan's heart once again. Yes, Gu Bianian had promised to love her forever, but who would have thought his forever turned out to be just a few short years? The father snorted coldly, slammed the table heavily, and exuded an icy aura. What a scoundrel. Before we came to Hong Kong, he swore to me that he would take good care of you. Is this how He takes care of you." The mother was already heartbroken, tears streaming down her face, and she clung tightly to Chi Huan's hand, unwilling to let go. "Huan, you've suffered. From now on, stay with us in Hong Kong, Mom, Dad, and your brother will take care of you for the rest of your life." After saying that, she wiped away her tears and asked urgently, "Why didn't Sui come back with you? Is it because that kid, Gubi and Ian, won't give you custody?" As soon as she said that, both Chi Fu and Chi Yan's eyes fell on Chi Huan. Huan, Sui is my granddaughter from the Chi family, and we absolutely cannot leave her with the Gu family." "Dad's right. If Gu Bianian refuses, I'll have the company lawyers sue him immediately. I'll bring Sui back even if I have to take him to court." An overwhelming wave of grief washed over Chi Huan once more. She clutched the necklace at her chest, her voice hoarse. Sui, she's gone." Chi Huan recounted, in exact detail, how Gu Bianian had secretly put Sui on the operating table and then diverted all the doctors away, leading to a post-operative infection with no one to resuscitate her, resulting in her death on the way. She choked up several times and couldn't speak. After haltingly recounting the entire ordeal, the Chi family living room fell into a deathly silence. Mrs. Chi's lips trembled slightly, and all the color drained from her face. Sui is his own daughter. How could Gu Bianian be so heartless? Mr. Chi, who was usually even-tempered, was so furious that his neck flushed crimson. "Fine, Gu Bianian is just wonderful, isn't he? Does he truly think the Chi family has no one to stand up for it?" Chi Yan clenched his fists so tightly they creaked. "Gu Bianian, for bullying Huan and causing Sui's death, we will settle this score with you properly." Meanwhile, at the Gu family villa, Shen Jinhe was forced to her knees by bodyguards, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded desperately for mercy. Gu Bianian paid her no heed, instead poring over the dossier his assistant had compiled on Shen Jinhe's activities from the past 5 years. With every page he turned, the fury in Gu Bianian's heart grew. It turned out that back then, Shen Jinhe was never pregnant, and there were no so-called gambling parents who took that money. After she got that money, she started shopping without restraint, and soon there was almost nothing left, but she had grown accustomed to the life of wealth and had no desire to return to a life of nothingness. When she learned that Chi Huan had given birth to a daughter, a thought suddenly crossed her mind, to use the child to secure her position. After all, becoming Mrs. Gu means having endless wealth. So she went to another province, searched through countless orphanages, and finally found a baby with eyes that were 6/10 like Gu Bianian, whom she named Xinyu. After completing the adoption procedures, she found a small city to raise Xinyu until he was 4 years old. When the time was right, she returned to the city where Gu Bianian lived, submitted her resume to the Gu group, and deliberately brought Xinyu to work with her, purposely wandering around the places where Gu Bianian frequently appeared. Just as she had anticipated, the moment Gu Bianian saw Xinyu's face, he was convinced the boy was his own flesh and blood. As for the so-called kidney failure, that too was a scheme by Shen Jinhe, who had bribed a doctor in a deliberate attempt to harm Sui and drive a wedge between him and his wife. Chi Huan bang. Gu Bianian violently kicked a chair over. Shen Jinhe let out a terrified shriek. He looked at the tear-stained woman and let out a cold laugh. "Shen Jinhe, you really are something. Don't worry, I will make you pay for what you did to Huan and Sui." After learning Xinyu's identity, he had him sent back to the orphanage. He wouldn't harm a 4-year-old child, but that didn't mean he would forgive Shen Jinhe, the mastermind behind it all. He gave a wave, and a burly bodyguard stepped forward. "You slapped Huan. As punishment, you will receive 99 slaps in return." The bodyguard rolled up his sleeves, revealing his muscular arms as he advanced. Shen Jinhe's eyes widened in terror as she began to plead frantically for mercy. "Mr. Gu, I know I was wrong. Please forgive me, even though Xinyu isn't your biological son. He looks so much like you. Isn't that fate, now that your daughter has passed away? You could think of him as..." Slap. The blow snapped Shen Jinhe's head to the side, leaving a ringing silence in her ears. The chill in Gu Bianian's eyes deepened. His Sui was one of a kind in this world. No one could ever take her place. The bodyguard kept slapping her face one after another with heavy blows. After 99 slaps, Shen Jinhe was barely conscious, her cheeks swollen and blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. Gu Bianian watched all this impassively and gave a cold order: "Throw her into the water." Shen Jinhe desperately shook her head, wanting to beg for mercy, but couldn't utter a complete sentence. She could only watch helplessly as she was shoved into the car. The incident that occurred in the banquet hall today also spread out. The president of the Gu group killed his own daughter for a bastard and forced his childhood sweetheart wife to leave. Is he the child's real father, or the devil himself? The heartless president of Gu Corporation. The entry about Gu Bianian has remained at the top of the trending charts. Many who saw it were outraged, leading to a sharp drop in Gu Corporation's stock price. Shareholders expressed their dissatisfaction with Gu Bianian and demanded a new election for the presidency, but at this moment, Gu Bianian had no time to spare for such thoughts. He sat alone in the living room, surrounded by empty liquor bottles, staring blankly at the divorce certificate. He had never imagined he would marry Chi Huan. For as long as he could remember, Chi Huan had always been by his side in his heart. Chi Huan was the only person he had chosen to spend the rest of his life with, yet he had hurt Chi Huan and caused the death of their daughter, all for a manipulative woman. A heart-wrenching pain surged from his chest, nearly suffocating Gu Bianian. At that moment, his assistant burst in, hurriedly pushing the door open and handing him a document. Mr. Gu, the Chi family has filed a lawsuit against you. Gangcheng, the Chi family mansion. Gu Bianian stood at the door of the Chi family, raising his hand several times, but he never dared to knock. Upon learning that Chi Huan had returned to Gangcheng, he immediately had his assistant book the earliest flight to Gangcheng. The assistant urged anxiously, Mr. Gu, the shareholders are already organizing a general meeting to replace the president. How can you leave at a time like this? Moreover, the Chi family has filed a lawsuit against you. You should be communicating with your lawyer as soon as possible. Gu Bianian almost crumpled the divorce certificate in his hand, insisting on going to Hong Kong. Handle the company matters for me, right now. I need to go apologize to Huan Huan and beg for her forgiveness. The assistant couldn't dissuade Gu Bianian and could only watch helplessly as he boarded the plane. Upon arriving in Hong Kong, Gu Bianian went straight to the Chi family home, yet deep down, he felt a twinge of trepidation, afraid to see the lifeless, stagnant look in Chi Huan's eyes. After a long moment of hesitation, he finally knocked on the Chi family's door. Who is it? Chi Yan opened the door. His expression darkened the moment he recognized the visitor, and without a second thought, he threw a heavy punch squarely into Gu Bianian's face. Gu Bianian, you've got some nerve showing your face in Hong Kong. The blow sent Gu Bianian staggering back several steps. A trickle of bright red blood began to seep slowly from his nose. He seemed impervious to pain, his face filled with pleading. Brother, can I see Huan Huan? I can explain to her. I was deceived by that woman. Hearing him still trying to justify himself, Chi Yan's anger burned even hotter. Explain. It's a fact that he made Sui Sui donate a kidney, leading to her death from post-surgery infection. It's also a fact that he made Huan Huan get slapped for that woman and was thrown into the water. What more is there to explain? The girls from the Chi family will never be wronged by him. Chi Yan's eyes were bloodshot as he grabbed Gu Bianian by the collar, raining punches down on him. Don't call me brother. You're divorced from Huan Huan now. She doesn't have a husband as heartless as you. Gu Bianian didn't resist, allowing Chi Yan to vent his anger. Only when Chi Yan grew tired did he stop, coldly addressing the battered Gu Bianian. Gu Bianian, my Chi family doesn't welcome you. Get out. Gu Bianian coughed a few times, struggled to stand up, but showed no intention of moving. I won't leave until I see Huan Huan. Chi Yan spat at him, his eyes blazing with fury. Now you're pretending to be deep and emotional. Where were you earlier? When you married Huan Huan, you swore to me that you would be good to her for a lifetime. But what happened? Not only did you father a child out of wedlock, but you also caused the death of Sui Sui and hurt Huan Huan. Is this how you treat her? Well, Gu Bianian was utterly ashamed under the barrage of accusations. He couldn't even defend himself. After all, these harms are facts, but he was only deceived by Shen Jinhe, which is why he felt guilty towards them. As for Sui Sui, he never imagined that donating a kidney would kill her. He always thought Sui Sui's surgery was successful. He just hadn't seen her because she was still recovering in the hospital. Sui Sui was his daughter, the little princess he had doted on since she was a child. Had he known that donating a kidney would cost her life, he would never have let her enter the operating room, allowing Shen Jinhe to slap Chi Huan and throw her into the water. It was all because he had blindly believed Shen Jinhe's one-sided story, his judgment clouded by rage. His original plan was to properly make it up to Chi Huan and Sui Sui after sending Shen Jinhe and her son abroad, but he never expected. At this point, Gu Bianian could only feebly repeat his excuses. I was deceived too, otherwise I would never have. Stop making excuses. Chi Yan cut him off with disgust. There's absolutely no way I'm letting you see Huan Huan. You should have received the lawsuit by now. You'd better start thinking about how you're going to explain yourself to the judge. With that, he slammed the door shut. Gu Bianian, dragging his aching body forward, pounded desperately on the door, but received no response. He had never felt such despair before. Was he really going to leave Hong City and never see Huan Huan again? No, he couldn't leave Huan Huan. Plop. Gu Bianian fell to his knees with a heavy thud before the Chi family's gate. He remained kneeling motionless for a full 10 hours, yet still, there was no sign of Chi Huan from the moment he got off the plane until now. He had gone nearly 20 hours without a bite of food or a sip of water, and the wounds inflicted by Chi Yan had not been treated by now. His body was swaying unsteadily, and the world before his eyes was beginning to blur. The thought of seeing Chi Huan made him snap back to consciousness, gritting his teeth and straightening his back after enduring for another hour. Gu Banyan's body had reached its limit, and his eyelids were about to close uncontrollably just as he was about to lose consciousness. A vaguely familiar figure approached him. Gu Banyan opened his eyes again in the hospital. He turned his head and saw Chi Huan, who was facing away from him. Huan. Gu Banyan's voice choked slightly. You're finally willing to see me. Chi Huan turned around, looking at him with a calm expression. This time, I just want to talk things through with you. Before Chi Huan went to see Gu Banyan, all three members of the Chi family were firmly opposed. She knew they were worried that seeing Gu Banyan would stir up the deep-seated pain within her, but she understood Gu Banyan. If she didn't completely sever his hopes, he would never give up. Gu Banyan, from the moment Sui passed away, it was completely over between us. Pain flickered in Gu Banyan's eyes, his voice hoarse and strained. Huan, I'm so sorry, I truly didn't know donating a kidney would lead to Sui's death. Even though Chi Huan had come to terms with Sui's passing, hearing the cause of her death still sent a fresh wave of agony through her heart. She let out a cold, bitter laugh, her eyes filled with an icy void. I rushed to the hospital and told you clearly that Sui was a premature baby, that her body couldn't handle a kidney donation, but you simply refused to believe me. Moreover, Sui had a chance to survive, but you sent all the doctors to perform surgery on your illegitimate child, thereby killing her chance to live. Do you know that before Sui died, she thought she had done something wrong, which was why you took her to the hospital. Even on her deathbed, she was still thinking about apologizing to you, asking for your forgiveness. But what were you doing at that time? Probably rejoicing that your illegitimate child was finally going to be saved. Gu Banyan felt as if a knife was stabbing his heart, and with every word Chi Huan spoke, the knife sliced deeper into his flesh. By the end, Gu Banyan's face was ashen. He had no idea that Sui had still been thinking of him when she passed away, yet he had stayed by the side of that boy who had nothing to do with him. He opened his mouth, but it was as if his throat was blocked, unable to make a sound. After a long pause, he finally spoke with difficulty. I really didn't know Sui would get infected. I'm sorry. Chi Huan closed his eyes, hiding the red veins beneath, his voice filled with deep-seated hatred. Gu Banyan, you know, I actually considered forgiving you. Before Sui took her last breath, I called you 18 times, begging you to send a doctor to the operating room. At that moment, I thought, as long as Sui was safe, I was willing to turn a blind eye to the existence of Shin Jinhe and her child, but you didn't answer a single call. Do you have any idea how agonizing it is to watch Sui stop breathing in my arms? Gu Banyan's heart shattered in anguish, and he violently coughed up a mouthful of blood. Tears mixed with blood from the corner of his mouth streamed down his face as Gu Banyan was consumed by overwhelming regret and grief. He knew that Chi Huan would never forgive him in this lifetime. Not only Chi Huan, but he himself could not forgive himself. He looked up, his eyes filled with nothing but despair. Huan, please tell me, where is Sui buried? Chi Huan suddenly laughed, a laugh that brought tears to her eyes. She spoke, her words cruel. You will never see Sui again in this lifetime. I told you, that was your last chance. The image of Chi Huan holding Sui in the hospital slowly surfaced in Gu Banyan's mind. It was at that moment he finally understood what Chi Huan had really meant by those words. Chi Huan gave him one last look. Next time we meet, it will be in court. After saying that, she opened the ward door without hesitation. As she walked down the corridor, Chi Huan heard heart-wrenching cries from inside the room. She didn't stop for a moment and left with big strides. On the day the trial formally commenced, Gu Banyan appeared in court on time, facing the accusations from the Chi family. He confessed without denial. Did you, the defendant, deceive the plaintiff's child onto the operating table for a kidney donation surgery without her knowledge? Yes. Did you, the defendant, order someone to throw the plaintiff into a pool? Yes. Thunk. The judge's gavel fell with finality. The defendant is sentenced to life imprisonment. Gu Banyan extended his hands, submitting as the police officer fastened the handcuffs and led him away. Before being shoved into the police car, he took one last look at Chi Huan. A rare smile appeared on her face. Gu Banyan's eyes were glued to Chi Huan until the police forcefully pushed